Chapter 1064. On the afternoon of the 23rd, Feng Qiuhuang hurried back to Luofeng City. During the war in Japan, Feng Qiuhuang had been promoted to duke with the bravery of the Blazing Flame Army. She rushed back to Luofeng City to apply for the capital promotion mission. It wouldn't be long before China's third capital city would be born. The next morning, Hai Rui, the prefectural governor of Jingzhou, arrived at Jianghu City to take up the post of prefectural governor of Yingzhou. Ouyang Shua chose Hai Rui for two reasons. Firstly, Hai Rui was originally from Jingzhou, and it wouldn't be good for them to work there for a long period of time. Secondly, Hai Rui was rather talented, but they didn't know how to cooperate with their superiors. They were most suitable to work alone on an isolated island. Transferring Hai Rui to be the prefectural governor of Yingzhou was Ouyang Shua's way of putting Hai Rui in an important position. With Hai Rui around, Ouyang Shua would be able to extricate himself from his burdensome duties and gain a better understanding of the situation on a global scale so he could have a good idea of what was going on. In the Asian continent, apart from Japan being conquered by China, Korea was also conquered by Li Jing's troops following the fall of Korea. After Bai Qi conquered South Palm, he predicted that he would be able to conquer Chenla in 2 days. Great Xia achieved complete victory on all three fronts, becoming the biggest winner of the global war. Ignoring everything else, Ouyang Shua's achievement points alone reached 1 million. He was only 400,000 achievement points away from the highest rank, the Son of Heaven Noble. Ouyang Shua was very curious about the privileges that Gaia would bestow upon the Son of Heaven Noble. In China's context, Son of Heaven was an impressive term. The most representative term was the Emperor of Zhou. There was an ancient saying, holding the Son of Heaven to command the nobles. Compared to the war in Annan, Ouyang Shua didn't receive as many achievement points as he did when Great Xia conquered 4 countries in one go. Furthermore, it was under the circumstances of the war. The root cause was that Great Xia fought alone in the war in Annan. Just by killing combat professionals, Ouyang Shua had obtained 600,000 achievement points. It was different during the war. With a large number of adventurer players participating, the enemy players basically didn't rely on the army to deal with them. Thus, Ouyang Shua's achievement points were naturally greatly reduced. Apart from China's participation, Java had successfully conquered East Timor, and Johor had conquered Thailand. As a result, the 10 ASEAN countries were only Java, Johor, Luzon, Piao, and Siam. Among the 5 countries, Johor, Piao, and Siam had signed a non-aggression pact with Great Xia, so there was no need to worry about war for the time being. Great Xia's next target was either Luzon or Java. Luzon was a tough nut to crack, just like Annan. Because it didn't have a land border with Great Xia, it would be more difficult to conquer it. Java was even more terrifying. They had 20 million players, which was twice as many as the Japanese. Just the 2 million Imperial Guards stationed in Coconut City was not something that Great Xia could do anything to. Coupled with the fact that Java had just conquered East Timor, it was even more terrifying. Naturally, Ouyang Shua decided on the strategy of first attacking Luzon, then Java. If the 2 countries were smart enough, they would form an even closer alliance after the war and jointly resist the threat of Great Xia. I must first pry open a hole. Ouyang Shua had a vague idea in his mind. Apart from the ASEAN countries, the war in India was also progressing very smoothly. They smoothly swept away the hindrances in the mainland and became the most threatening gaming region bordering Tubo. India was also the only country in the Asian region that could contend with Huaxia. Putting everything else aside, India had 100 million players, and there were 10 million Imperial Guards stationed in Delhi. Just the thought of it made one's scalp tingle. This was also because India's foundation could not be compared to Huaxia's. With just one city, they were somewhat stretched. Apart from India, the Persian Empire to the west of Huaxia had also quietly risen, and there was a tendency to gradually integrate into one. After this round of war, it was likely that they would soon enter the rhythm of establishing a dynasty. Ouyang Shua, who was constantly paying attention to the system announcements, noticed that the top 10 dukes in the world had already been born before the end of the month of war. Feng Qiuhuang, was only ranked 7th. Lord Pushkin of St. Petersburg, Lord Manstein of Rhine City, Lord Dillawa of Bangalore City, Lord William of Castle Avic, and Lord Henry of Vic City were all listed. Even Kaiser had successfully been promoted to a duke and was ranked 10th on the list. Apart from the top 10 dukes, there were probably still a batch of dukes in the world who did not have the chance to appear in the system announcements. After the month of war, the game world would officially enter the Empire struggle mode. The lords who did not make it to the wave of dukes were destined to be eliminated. Apart from Asia, the situation in North America also caught Ouyang Shua's attention. It was reported that the Dawson dynasty had already taken over Panama and taken over the Panama Canal, controlling the lifeline that connected the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. This also marked the beginning of the Dawson dynasty's expansion. From now on, the Dawson dynasty would definitely speed up its global expansion and fight with Great Xia for the global sea control. The two hegemons would probably be at odds for a long period of time. After that was the European continent. In this month of war, England, Spain, Holland, France, and other European regions had surprisingly set their sights on the African continent, and all of them had succeeded. The historical wave of colonization in Africa seemed to be repeating itself. Due to the existence of Great Xia in the African continent, Africa would probably be very lively in the future. The Italian region and the Greek region had set their sights on the European continent, attempting to expand their respective territories inland to increase their authority in the Mediterranean Sea. From now on, the entire European continent would welcome a reshuffle. The strong would become stronger, the weak would become weaker, and some might even be eliminated. The situation of Europe blossoming would gradually evolve into something similar to China's Warring States era. Then there was the Arab Empire that bordered the Persian Empire. All in all, for a very long period of time in the future, the gaming region along the Mediterranean Sea would not be too peaceful. If Great Xia wanted to maintain a strong presence in this region, they would still face all sorts of challenges. Especially with the intensification of mergers between the gaming regions, there would definitely be a few super empires in the future. They would not allow Great Xia to exist. There's still a long way to go. Ouyang Shua's gaze was distant. All of these were just the surface. Hidden in the chaos were two invisible hands. One was the Silver Hand, and the other was the Federation Academics. The two might not seem obvious, but they were truly influencing the global gaming landscape. If not for Ouyang Shua's existence, these two hands would have probably started from the 5th year of Gaia. They would have developed independently, infiltrated each other, and gradually turned into a local confrontation, followed by an all-out war. But now, Great Xia was sandwiched in the middle. It seemed to be boundless, but it was treading on thin ice. The world is like a chessboard. Who is the chess piece, and who is the player? Ouyang Shua still had no answer. On the afternoon of the 24th, Xiongba and his party arrived in Jianghu City to discuss the division of Japan. The adventurers of the North Army were still waiting for the distribution of the spoils of war. They had not left Jianghu City yet. Seeing Xiongba and his party, there were people who mocked, cursed, and showed off. This made Xiongba feel very embarrassed. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua understood Xiongba's situation and quickly led them to the small courtyard. Since both sides did not have much disagreement on how to divide Japan, the entire negotiation process was extremely smooth without any hiccups. Ouyang Shua did not expect Di Chun to be so tactful. That's good too. It saves us the trouble of talking. Xiongba even suggested that he hoped to cooperate with Great Xia on the sea route to America. His intentions were very obvious, but he was tactfully rejected by Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua immediately saw through Handan City's intentions. Before the war in Japan, Handan City had almost monopolized the entire Pacific Sea route. The ocean trade was flourishing, and their pockets were getting bigger. Their days were extremely comfortable. Now that Great Xia and Fallen Phoenix City had suddenly joined the fray, they naturally had many misgivings. Not to mention Fallen Phoenix City. They did not have any experience in ocean trade and had no foundation. They had to start from scratch and were far from being a match for Handan City. Hence, Dechen did not take them seriously. The key was still Great Xia. In terms of ocean trade, Great Xia was the real pioneer. Even now, as the Dawson dynasty and other territories entered the ocean trade, Great Xia was still the largest territory in the world. More importantly, Great Xia controlled the Straits of Malacca, the Gulf of Aden, the Strait of Gibraltar, and the Cape of Good Hope. They were the true overlords of the sea. Once Great Xia entered the Pacific Ocean trade, Handan City's days would not be as good as before. This was also one of the reasons why Dechen was not too willing to conquer Japan. Today, the territory's economy had become one of the key factors in determining whether a territory was strong or not. On a global scale, all the rich territories were basically trading regions. Hence, no matter how much Dechen valued the Pacific Sea route, it was only a matter of time. Ouyang Shua's straightforward rejection made Xiongba rather depressed. His expression was gloomy. No matter what Dechen decided, the moment they merged into Handan City, the fate of Xiongba's family had already been firmly tied together. Both would prosper together, and both would suffer together. Seeing this, the moment Xiongba left, Ouyang Shua suddenly said, "Brother Xiongba, times have changed. Even Earth is gone. Nothing remains the same." Xiongba heard this and stopped in his tracks. However, he did not turn back and left silently. Ouyang Shua saw this and sighed in his heart. After sending off Xiongba and the rest, Ouyang Shua then began to host the treasure distribution. All of them were of the highest quality. Chapter 1065. Since it was a treasure hunt, it was only natural that the equipment would be purple gold rank and above. The most precious ones were the 3 divine weapons of Japan, the Kusanagi no Magatama and the Yada no Kagami. Among them, the Kusanagi no Kagami was a national weapon of Japan, and it was dropped when the Meiji Emperor committed seppuku. Name: Heavenly Gathering Cloud Sword, divine weapon. Type: nation weapon. Hardness: 85, sharpness: 88, tenacity: 82 characteristics. Edge breaker: when a weapon's hardness is lower than the Heavenly Cumulus Sword, there is a chance that the weapon will be cut in half by the Heavenly Cumulus Sword. Unique item: cannot be dropped and cannot be traded after binding. Sure kill skill: Wave Sword, releases Ice Blade and Exploding Flame Sword Chi, creating a wave engraving that kills invisibly and cannot be avoided. Cooldown time: 1 month. Evaluation: one of Japan's 3 divine weapons, obtained from the 4th head of the Yamada no Orochi. Name: Yasakani no Magatama, God tier. Type: Dynasty Treasure. Attributes: Bone Root +2, Comprehension +2, Fortune +8, Charm +3. Characteristics: Demon Suppression and Exorcism, untainted by all evils. Demons retreat. Characteristics: Luck, increases popularity of the territory by 50, increases luck of the territory by 30. Evaluation: one of Japan's 3 divine weapons, also known as Godstone. Name: Yada no Kagami, God level. Type: Rare treasure. Attributes: Root +3 points, Comprehension +4 points, Fortune +3 points, Charm +5 points. Characteristics: Demon Suppression and Exorcism, untainted by all evils. Demons retreat. Ultimate skill: Lock, releases a ray of light that locks the target in place, making them unable to move. The duration depends on the strength of the target. Cooldown time: half a year. Evaluation: one of Japan's 3 divine weapons, representing integrity. After some discussion, the Kusanagi sword was given to Crimson Romance. The Yasakani no Magatama was given to Feng Xiuhuang, who would use it to establish a new dynasty. And the Yada no Kagami mirror was naturally given to Ouyang Shua. As compensation, Snow Morning Rose Mercenary Group and Fallen Leaf Alliance will be given 4 more purple gold grade equipment. Ouyang Shua and Feng Xiuhuang didn't want any equipment. Instead, they wanted a special item: Teleportation Talisman. After use, it can create a teleportation array in the target city. There were 2 teleportation talismans. Ouyang Shua and Feng Xiuhuang each had one. Feng Xiuhuang was naturally going to use it in Hokkaido to establish a stable overseas stronghold. Whereas Ouyang Shua, picking up the teleportation talisman, Zhang Xian fell into deep thought. After dividing up the spoils of war, the hundreds of thousands of adventurer players began teleporting away. Bloody Romance, Xie and the others bid farewell to Ouyang Shua, while Feng Xiuhuang made her way to Hokkaido. The bustling city of Jianghu suddenly became deserted. According to the plan, Ouyang Shua was originally going to teleport to Korea and take charge of the post-war arrangements for Goryeo. However, the moment Ouyang Shua received the transfer talisman, he suddenly changed his mind. For the next few days, Ouyang Shua stayed in Jianghu City. He didn't rush back even when something happened in Dali. During this period of time, Bai Qi led his troops to successfully take down Jinla, signifying that the Great Xia dynasty had achieved all of its objectives in the Kingdom War. Not only did they clear away the hidden dangers, but they also used this opportunity to expand their territory. Strangely, even so, Ouyang Shua had no intention of returning to the capital. 2 days ago, in the royal city of Dali, when he found out that Duan Zhengchun had sent an envoy to Great Xia and had the intention of abdicating his position, Duan Hong could no longer sit still. Wasn't his clan racking their brains for the ultimate control of Dali? If Duan Zhengchun abdicated, what else was there to do? Seeing that he couldn't stop Duan Zhengchun, Duan Hong could only take the risk and choose to launch a palace coup to control the royal city of Dali before the matter of abdication was settled. The problem was that the imperial guards of Dali only listened to Duan Zhengchun, so it was really difficult for Duan Hong to launch a palace coup. Fortunately, Duan Hong had been in the palace for several years and had made some achievements. Many of the eunuchs and palace maids in the palace had long been bribed by Duan Hong, so he was well informed. To launch a palace coup, Duan Hong could only rely on the power of the players. However, the last time the Xiao Alliance attempted to intervene in the war between Great Xia and the Yanhuang Alliance, they suffered a crushing defeat. Ouyang Shua expelled the Xiao clan and took control of the fallen Leave Alliance, causing Duan Hong to lose a powerful ally in Dali. Fortunately, there was still the bloodshed. Speaking of this assassin organization, Ouyang Shua had a period of interaction. During the second auction, the bloodshed was hired by Lord Chunxin to assassinate Ouyang Shua in the commercial street of the capital, but they failed. Since then, Ouyang Shua tried to find the nest of the bloodshed with the help of the Rattlesnake mercenary group and destroy it. However, the bloodshed was very tactful and took the initiative to express goodwill, so Ouyang Shua gave up. The Rattlesnake mercenary group was absorbed by Ouyang Shua, and the current Black Snake Guard were formed. After 3 years, the reputation of the bloodshed in the game became more and more resounding, and they had carried out several major cases. The night of the 24th of June, which was the night before Ouyang Shua presided over the Treasure Distribution Conference. Hired by Duan Hong with a large sum of money, and under Duan Hong's guidance, 10 top assassins of the bloodshed disguised themselves as palace eunuchs and quietly snuck into the Dali Imperial Palace to assassinate Duan Zhengchun. It had to be said that the bloodshed was really daring. They even dared to assassinate the emperor. Because it was unexpected and Duan Zhengchun was completely unprepared, the bloodshed really succeeded. That night, the emperor of Dali, Duan Zhengchun, was killed in his bedroom. As soon as the news came out, the entire Dali kingdom was immersed in grief. The emperor, Duan Zhengchun, was very popular. Although the state affairs were difficult, he had never treated the people harshly. No one expected that he would die a violent death. The imperial court of Dali was also in chaos. According to the rules, after Duan Zhengchun's death, the crown prince, Duan Yu, should inherit the throne. However, at this time, Duan Hong stood out to compete with Duan Yu for the throne, and he even accused Duan Yu of being the murderer of the emperor. Many of the ministers in the imperial court had long been roped in by Duan Hong's family. At this time, they also stood out to speak for Duan Hong, saying that Duan Hong had both ability and integrity, and was more suitable to inherit the throne. Naturally, there were also ministers who supported Duan Yu, especially the group of old ministers who followed Duan Zhengchun to the wilderness. They followed Duan Yu's lead. It was Duan Hong. He's a strange person of unknown origin. What qualifications does he have to inherit the throne? The two sides argued endlessly, and they almost fought in the imperial court. Seeing this, the imperial army of Dali could only remain neutral. The entire Dali city was instantly in chaos. Without the help of the imperial army, Duan Yu found it difficult to survive the most difficult night. The next morning, the elite group of the Fallen Leaves Alliance returned to Dali after obtaining the treasures. Luo Wuchen, the leader of the Fallen Leaves Alliance, received the news. Although he did not know the twists and turns, he immediately realized that this was an opportunity to help Great Xia conquer Dali. Ouyang Shua's dissatisfaction with Duan Hong was already known to everyone. If Duan Hong was allowed to ascend the throne, the consequences would be unimaginable. Luo Wuchen was very decisive. He immediately contacted Duan Yu and expressed his willingness to help Duan Yu stabilize the situation in Royal City and help him smoothly ascend the throne. Duan Yu naturally hit it off when he was trusted. With the support of the Fallen Leaves Alliance, Duan Yu governed the country as the crown prince. He did not mention the matter of ascending the throne, but only said to the ministers in the imperial court, "Father's corpse is not cold yet, and I dare not covet the throne. As the governor, I will thoroughly investigate the assassination of father and bring justice to the world. Before this matter is investigated clearly, no one is allowed to mention the matter of ascending the throne again." Duan Yu's move immediately disrupted Duan Hong's rhythm. The reason given by Duan Yu was upright, and Duan Hong could not refute it at all. Otherwise, it would be unfilial. It was customary for the crown prince to govern the country, and even the ministers who supported Duan Hong could not refute it. Even better, Duan Hong had previously accused Duan Yu of being the murderer of Duan Jingquan's assassination. Now that Duan Yu showed an attitude of thoroughly investigating the matter and swearing not to let it go, the suspicion was immediately washed away. In this way, Duan Yu's position in the imperial court was even more stable, and even the imperial army began to favor him. And once the matter of Duan Jingquan's assassination was thoroughly investigated, some clues would be found. Once the spearhead was pointed at Duan Hong, not only Duan Hong, but the entire Duan Hong family would fall into a situation of eternal damnation. The situation in Dali immediately reversed 180 degrees. Duan Jingquan's evaluation of Duan Hong was that he had great ambition but little talent, which showed that it was not a lie. Since Duan Hong was prepared to rebel in the palace, he should have killed Duan Yu as well to completely remove the hidden danger. But in the end, he left behind a tail and immediately suffered a backlash. Another point was that Duan Hong's intelligence work was a bit bad. He did not pay attention to the movements of the Fallen Leave Alliance and allowed them to control the situation in Dali, causing them to lose everything. It was precisely unable to accomplish anything, but good at spoiling things. Just as the Fallen Leaves Alliance returned to Dali, the diplomatic group sent by Duan Jingquan also arrived at Lingxi City. Yunnan's governor Baihua received the news and hurriedly met the diplomatic group. He immediately arranged for people to bring the diplomatic group to the capital. At the same time, Baihua immediately sent a letter to Ouyang Shua, explaining the matter. Ouyang Shua received the news and ordered Chao Chun to lead the 1st Legion of the Soaring Eagle Army to immediately teleport to Lingxi City and move to the border of Dali Prefecture, paying attention to the movements in Dali. He immediately realized that an excellent opportunity had arrived. Under Ouyang Shua's remote control, the Fallen Leaves Alliance, the army, the cabinet, the Mountain Sea Guards, and other organizations quickly took action. Taking down Dali Prefecture was their first priority. Since Ouyang Shua personally intervened in this matter, it meant that Duan Hong's family was not far from destruction. Under the investigation of the Mountain Sea Guards, the murderer was pointed at the Blood Edge. Ouyang Shua had the contact information of the Blood Edge's leader, so he directly sent a letter to inquire. According to the rules, an assassin organization like the Blood Edge could not divulge the employer's information to a third party. But who was Ouyang Shua? This hegemon-level figure who could make the wilderness tremble with a stomp of his foot had personally inquired, and the matter involved the vital interests of Great Xia. How could the Blood Edge dare to conceal it? If they were not careful, they would be destroyed. When the Blood Edge's leader heard that Duan Zhengchun was prepared to abdicate his position to Great Xia, he could not wait to tear Duan Hong into pieces. His heart burned with anger. This matter involves Great Xia. Is it something we can participate in? If he had known that the matter would be so complicated, the Blood Edge would not have dared to accept this deal even if he was beaten to death. Immediately, the Blood Edge's leader not only dealt with the person in charge of this deal, but also completely divulged the relevant information about Duan Hong's contract to kill to Ouyang Shua. Chapter 1066. After obtaining first-hand information about Bloodblade's assassination of Duan Zhengchun, Ouyang Shua now had to consider how to use this as a bargaining chip to negotiate with Duan Yu. Duan Zhengchun was willing to abdicate, but it didn't mean that Duan Yu was willing. Of course, without the support of Great Xia, Duan Yu wouldn't be able to ascend to the throne. Now, it depended on how to arrange a dignified way to ensure the survival of the Duan family and Great Xia's control over Dali. Ouyang Shua handed the matter to the cabinet to make a decision when he returned to the capital. June 28th, Jianghu City. Ouyang Shua finally decided to return to the capital. Strangely, he didn't choose to teleport. Instead, he got the royal fleet to accompany the Cliff Mountain fleet and prepare to return to Shanghai City by sea. In addition to the two fleets, the Leopard Army, led by Han Xian, and the 1st Legion of the Brave Tiger Army would also accompany. The 1st Legion of the City Guards was temporarily stationed in Yingzhou County. Before the Privy Council completed the reorganization of the Yingzhou Legion, the Legion would be responsible for the defense of Yingzhou County. The Pacific Fleet naturally stayed behind. At 9 in the morning, the vast fleet set off from the Jianghu port and headed south, braving the wind and waves. By the time the fleet passed through the Yizhou Strait, it was already July 1st, and the first month of national war had officially come to an end. The relevant bonuses, attack limits, and other national war settings were all canceled. The world ushered in a short period of peace. The victors were busy taking over new territories, and the losers were long gone from the wilderness. Therefore, no one thought that any territory would choose to start a new national war as soon as the month of national war ended. The gains did not make up for the losses. The territories around the world entered a semi-relaxed state, including the Luzon region. Ouyang Shua saw this point and wanted to suddenly launch a national war against Luzon at the most unlikely time. July 2nd, Lavig City. Luzon was mainly composed of 3 major island groups: Luzon Island, the Visayan Islands, and MLL Island. Luzon Island was in the north, MLL Island was in the south, and the Visayans were in between. Luzon Island in the north was the largest, most populous, and most economically developed island in Luzon. It was rich in rice, coconuts, and Luzon cigars were even more famous. City M was located at the southernmost end of Luzon Island, while Lavig City was located at the northernmost end of Luzon Island. In ancient times, Luzon Island was a small country called Luzon. Since the Song and Yuan dynasties, Hua Xia's merchant ships often came here to trade. The East-West Ocean Research and the history of the Ming Dynasty foreign biographies have special records. During the Ming Dynasty, Luzon was known as Greater Luzon and Lesser Luzon. From 1571 to 1898, Luzon Island was occupied by Spain. Therefore, the sea record was translated as Lesser Luzon, and Greater Luzon was used to refer to the entire Luzon kingdom under Spanish rule. As a port city, Lavig City gradually woke up in the morning, especially at the pier. Fishing boats were covered in moonlight, braving the wind and breaking the waves as they went out to sea to fish. During the month of the Kingdom War that had just ended, the Lusong Empire had stayed out of it. Naturally, the citizens of the territory had escaped the calamity and didn't experience the cruelty of war. The entire city was very peaceful and tranquil. The sea breeze blew through the streets and gradually woke up the sleeping people. At this moment, warships appeared in front of the port. The Great Xi'an Navy's unique blue sea dragon flag was paired with white sails. Facing the rising sun, the sails fluttered in the sea breeze. As they approached the port, the fleet suddenly accelerated. Before the people could react, the vanguard of the fleet had already rushed into the port. Boom! 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 The sudden sound of cannons broke the tranquility of the city and woke up the people from their dreams. What's going on? The people hurriedly got up and didn't even have time to wash up. They anxiously walked on the streets and asked each other. It's the sound of cannons coming from the direction of the pier. Someone said, could it be that the pirates are here? The people were at a loss. They, who had never experienced war before, were very flustered. Lavic City Lord had also woken up and received news that the pier had been bombarded. Quickly go and find out if it's pirates or enemy warships. The City Lord was still calm. However, calmness couldn't save Lavic City. Before they could find out anything, the leopard troop had already successfully landed at the pier under Han Xian's command. The vast army practically didn't meet any resistance and smoothly charged into the city, quickly taking control of the vital points. Soon after, Ouyang Shuo led the divine martial guards into the city lord's residence. Han Xian didn't stay and commanded the leopard troop to use Lavic City as the base point to disperse and attack the surrounding territories. The First Legion of the Brave Tiger Army stayed behind in Lavic City. In the city lord's residence, Ouyang Shuo took out the teleportation talisman he had just obtained and chose to use it. With a flash of blue light, a mysterious international teleportation array appeared in the square in front of the city lord's residence. With this international teleportation array, Great Xia established a bridgehead in Luzon City and could teleport their army to attack Luzon City at any time. This was much cheaper than launching a national war and attacking from the sea. As the teleportation array was opened, the divine martial guards brought Ouyang Shuo's edict to Shanghai City and ordered the cabinet to urgently transfer a group of officials to take over the city and establish order. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo had already informed the cabinet in advance before setting off from Jianghu City. Otherwise, they would probably be in a mess. During the month of national war, Great Xia had already transferred a large number of officials to Goryeo, Nanzhong, Chenla, and Yingzhou Commandery. Now that they had to support Luzon City, they were indeed stretched thin. The surprise attack on Luzon City was carried out unusually smoothly. Before the fleet arrived at the port, they had already exchanged fire with the first formation of the Luzon fleet in the surrounding waters. The unprepared Luzon fleet was unable to retaliate in the face of the Great Xia fleet. In less than 2 hours, the first formation of the Luzon fleet was completely defeated. At that moment, a system announcement sounded in the ears of the sleeping Luzon players. System announcement. The Lord of the Huaxiao region has initiated a national war. Luzon City has entered the national war mode, and City M has entered a state of level 2 alert. Please check the specific situation yourself. System announcement. Luzon City has entered the national war mode. According to the rules of the national war, during the national war, the teleportation array in the capital will automatically be cut off from the teleportation array in the territory. Players who die in battle will not be able to reincarnate immediately. Please inform all players. I'm sure the Luzon players are already gathering in the north. Under the cover of the fleet's return, it was a special period right after the end of the national war. It wasn't difficult to take down Lavic City. The difficult part was how to defend it. If Great Xia took a bite out of Luzon, even if Luzon's overlord Martin could endure it, the 8 million players in Luzon wouldn't be able to. They would definitely take back Lavic City at all costs. Without the teleportation talisman, Ouyang Shuo wouldn't have provoked Luzon at this time. Even if he opened the international teleportation array, Ouyang Shuo didn't think of taking down the entire Luzon city through this war. After going through a series of national wars, the Great Xia army was very tired and wasn't in a good position to start another war. As long as they could defend Lavic City, it would be considered a victory. Han Xian didn't lead his troops to expand his territory. He had 2 main purposes. One was to plunder the provisions, and the other was to plunder the craftsmen and commoners. With provisions, the army could be stationed in Lavic City for a long time. As for the craftsmen and commoners, They would naturally be used to reinforce the defenses of Lavik City and turn it into a war fortress. As soon as the officials sent by the cabinet arrived, they immediately took action. With the cooperation of the brave Tiger Legion, a portion of the commoners were driven out of the city and were responsible for cutting down all the trees outside the city. Even the weeds had to be swept away. There would be no place to hide outside Lavik City. The lumber and stone materials that were cut down were transported back to the city. They were either hoarded or used to defend the city or used to reinforce the city's defenses. The workshops in the city also began to operate to produce enough arrows. In addition, Ouyang Shua also took advantage of the convenience of the fleet to bring a batch of weapons, equipment, and provisions from Edo to help the army tide over the initial difficulties. In the future, Lavik City would be under military control. To put it bluntly, it would be a super military camp responsible for fighting against Luzon City. After opening the International Teleportation Array, Ouyang Shua informed the allied guilds such as the Malevolent Blood Mercenary Group and the Morning Snow Rose Mercenary Group to dispatch guild members who were passionate about PK to help. It could be foreseen that before Great Xia's next large-scale invasion of Luzon City, there would be hot-blooded PK between adventurer players at every moment. This place would become a new hot spot for PK fanatics. The highly efficient administrative system of Great Xia was vividly reflected in the Lavik City incident. Ouyang Shua didn't need to say anything. In just 2 days, everything was already on the right track. On the periphery, the Leopard Army led by Han Xian had already clashed with the Luzon vanguard. Although Ouyang Shua had no intention of invading Luzon City, he didn't mind using the Leopard Army to fight with Luzon City. He wanted to deal a blow to Luzon's self-confidence and let them see the power of the Great Xia Army. The battle at the front and the construction at the back were all orderly. After receiving Ouyang Shua's request, Bloody Romance and the others were quite enthusiastic. While they lamented Ouyang Shua's madness, they were very kind and sent out PK teams to support them. When the players in the Huaxia region learned that Great Xia had actually built an international teleportation array in Luzon City, some PK fanatics immediately became excited. Without waiting for Ouyang Shua's call, they took the initiative to apply for teleportation to Lavik City. Naturally, Ouyang Shua didn't reject anyone. In just a few days, Lavik City had gathered 100,000 PK fanatics. The large influx of players also put a huge burden on the logistics of Lavik City. Ouyang Shua immediately ordered the nearby Annan Province and Jingzhou County to transport provisions to Lavik City. At the same time, Ouyang Shua also welcomed the Great Xia Chamber of Commerce to do business here. In order to ensure the safety of the waters around Lavik City, the Cliff Mountain Fleet stationed 2 full fleets at the port of Lavik City. This was enough to ensure the safety of the ships that came and went. With the support of the Indian Ocean Fleet, the Luzon Fleet definitely wouldn't have the guts to attack Lavik City. On the 7th of July, seeing that Lavik City was gradually stabilizing, Ouyang Shua left Han Xian behind to temporarily oversee the city while he set off for Shanghai City under the protection of the Royal Navy. The 1st Regiment of the Brave Tiger Army also returned to their station. Chapter 1067, July 8th, Shanghai City. Although there were a lot of things waiting for Ouyang Shua to deal with in the capital, after returning, Ouyang Shua did not summon a group of ministers in the morning and a group of ministers in the afternoon. He was so busy that he felt dizzy and disoriented. This time, Ouyang Shua only summoned the first minister of the cabinet, Jiang Shang, the inner cabinet elder and grand secretary of the treasury, Zhang Liang, and the grand council minister and minister of military affairs, Du Ruhui, to the imperial study to discuss matters. First, Jiang Shang reported the cabinet's opinion on the arrangement of Dali. The cabinet suggested that the Dali kingdom be stripped of its title and the former Dali kingdom's crown, Prince Duan, be conferred the title of Marquis of Dali instead. In view of the special relationship between the Duan family of Dali and the Dali city, they could be allowed to stay in the Dali city. The only thing is that the current Dali Imperial Palace needs to be remodeled and downgraded to a marquise manor, Jiang Shang said concisely. Prior to this, the title of nobility in Great Xia was only reserved for one generation and could not be inherited. Bestowing the title of Marquis of Supreme Court to Duan, you could be considered as breaking the convention, and it was the first time since the founding of Great Xia. Only in this way could the Duan family of Dali be moved. Ouyang Shuo nodded and added, "That's good. The former emperor of Dali, Duan Zhengshan, should also be conferred posthumous titles. Great Xia should personally come forward and bury him according to the Marquis ceremony." Ouyang Shuo still had a good impression of Duan Zhengshan, this emperor whom he had never met before. "Your Majesty is wise." Jiang Shang nodded in agreement. This way, he could also win over the hearts of the people of Dali. "The cabinet has two proposals on how to settle down Dali City. Your Majesty, please decide." "Tell me about it." "First, put the Supreme Court Commandery under the direct jurisdiction of the Imperial Court. Second, incorporate the Supreme Court Commandery into the Yunnan province, and move the provincial seat from Lingxi City to Dali City." There were nearly 10 million people in Dali, which was equivalent to the population of a province. The cabinet's hesitation was because they were worried that incorporating Dali County into Yunnan province would cause the Governor-General's Yamen to grow in power and subsequently fight for power with the imperial court. Of course, there were benefits to the second plan. Everyone knew that the governor of Yunnan, Bai Hua, was originally the feudal lord of Lingxi City. His influence in Lingxi City and Kunming County was unparalleled. Now that he was the governor of Yunnan, he could be said to be a feudal lord. This time, he had seized the opportunity to openly transfer Bai Hua out of Lingxi City. This would also help the imperial court balance out Bai Hua's influence in Kunming County. Even if Bai Hua was unwilling, he could only obey. At the end of the day, Dali was a royal city. No matter how one looked at it, it was more suitable to serve as a provincial administrative center than Lingxi City. There was no reason for the outside world to say that His Majesty was indirectly suppressing his former ally and causing any negative effects. Because it involved the question of the king's trust toward the Yunnan Governor-General, it was an extremely sensitive matter. Before clearly understanding the king of Chu's intention, naturally Jiang Shang did not dare to make a decision on his own. Ouyang Shuo naturally saw through the intentions of the cabinet. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Let's implement the second plan." "Yes, sir." Jiang Shang's eyes flashed. Ouyang Shuo sat on his seat, but his thoughts weren't what Jiang Shang had guessed. Towards Bai Hua, Ouyang Shuo not only trusted him, he even had high hopes for him. Leaving Lingxi City would only be beneficial to Bai Hua, and if he couldn't break free from the current barriers, how would he be able to improve further in the future? It was just that even an old official like Jiang Shang had misunderstood his intentions. It was unknown whether or not Bai Hua would misunderstand. "I hope she can understand." However, Ouyang Shuo did not intend to explain anything to Bai Hua. Some things would be meaningless if they were explained clearly. What does the Bureau of Military Affairs think about the 800,000 Imperial Guards of Dali? Ouyang Shuo asked Du Ruhui. With Dali's surrender, the 800,000 Imperial Guards would naturally be incorporated. Great Xia had never reorganized an army of such a scale, so the Bureau of Military Affairs had to come up with a creative plan. After all, Great Xia had won many battles in Dongying, Goryeo, Nanzhong, and Chenla, so they did not lack soldiers. Furthermore, the Imperial Guards of the capital who had not experienced a war were only slightly better than new recruits, but there was still a huge gap between them and Great Xia's field army. It was not suitable for them to be incorporated into the regular army. The battle in Dongying was a clear proof. In just one day, 200,000 of the 500,000 Imperial Guards of Dali were defeated. Although Han Xian had done this intentionally, it was enough to show that the Imperial Guards were barely satisfactory. Only like Great Qin, Great Han, and Great Tang, after the Emperor had settled in, could they use famous generals to remodel the Imperial Guards. It would be best if they could experience the tempering of war before they could be tempered into a truly strong army. In any case, the roots of the Imperial Guards were good, and the quality of the soldiers was also the best choice. As for Dali, Firstly, Duan Zhengchun had just settled in Dali, and secondly, Dali lacked famous generals, so the Imperial Guard were naturally not satisfactory. As for how to reorganize the army, Du Ruhui, the Minister of Military Affairs, was considered experienced. She replied, "The Bureau of Military Affairs suggests that the 800,000 Imperial Guards be divided into 3 parts. One part will be refined into the regular army, one part will be integrated into the City Defense Force, and the last part will be arranged for transfer." City Defense Force? This was a new term. The Bureau of Military Affairs believes that for large cities, such as the capital and the former capital, it is impossible to deal with large-scale violent incidents by relying on bailiffs to maintain law and order. It is necessary to equip a city defense force to surround and protect the safety of the city. Du Ruhui's statement was similar to the Federal Armed Police Force, but it was not complete. After thinking for a while, Ouyang Shua said, "The name of the City Defense Force is not appropriate. It is better to call it the Garrison Force. Its responsibilities should include internal defense, gold, forest, water conservancy, traffic, security, border defense, fire control, etc. The Garrison Force is not under the command of the Grand Council, but is under the dual leadership of the Bureau of Military Affairs and the local yamen. Cities above the county level should be equipped with the corresponding garrison force according to the actual needs." This caused Du Ruhui to be a little confused. According to the king, if every city was equipped with a garrison force, the number of garrison forces needed would be massive. More importantly, every responsibility of the garrison force was linked to the yamen, including but not limited to the Public Security Bureau, the Bank of the Four Seas, the Forestry Department, the Water Conservancy Department, the Tax Department, and so on. It needed to be coordinated by the Bureau of Military Affairs. Seeing this, Ouyang Shua said to Jiang Shang, "This matter will be jointly handled by the Cabinet and the Bureau of Military Affairs. Draw up a detailed system of rules and regulations, and then implement it. Don't cause any trouble." This old subject receives the decree. Only the cabinet could handle such a huge amount of coordination. Fortunately, Jiang Shang was not afraid of trouble. He said with a smile, "This old subject suggests that we can first use the capital as a pilot. After landing, we can expand it to the level of the provincial administration and further summarize and refine it. Finally, it will be passed down level by level through the provincial governor." This was the words of an experienced strategist. Du Ruhui naturally had no objection. If the garrison forces of each city were to be set up one by one, the total scale would not be less than 500,000. If they were all under the command of the Bureau of Military Affairs, it would only greatly improve the status of the Bureau of Military Affairs. Ouyang Shua continued, "The 800,000 Dali Imperial Guards will only be reorganized into 2 field corps. One will be the 5th Imperial Guard Corps, with Yu Yun as the corps commander." The Imperial Guard Corps was the only one that had not reached full strength. Using this opportunity, Ouyang Shua not only replenished the Imperial Guards, but also promoted the young General Yu Yun. Du Ruhui nodded and noted it down. The other place will be reserved for the Imperial Guards to form the 1st Imperial Guard Corps. After the Imperial Guards and City Guards, this was the 3rd Corps directly under Ouyang Shua's command. Its significance was extraordinary. Just from a name, one could tell that the Imperial Guards were the same as the Imperial Guards, the trump cards. The positions of the two were completely different. Oda Nobunaga is appointed as the corps commander of the 1st Imperial Guard Corps. This corps only has gunmen, and it is also equipped with an artillery brigade and a flying squadron. It is the dynasty's first pure firearms corps. Ouyang Shua continued, "With the acceleration of the dynasty's industrialization, the army's use of firearms was the general trend. Before the large-scale transformation, Ouyang Shua needed to set a benchmark for the entire army. With this as the starting point, he would slowly expand it to the entire army and complete a historic transformation. The Imperial Guards are this benchmark. After Oda Nobunaga was captured, Ouyang Shua had a deep conversation with him in Edo. At that time, Ouyang Shua revealed the idea of forming the Imperial Guards to Oda Nobunaga. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shuo successfully persuaded him to surrender. Jiang Shang, Zhang Liang, and Du Ruhui listened to this, and each of them fell into deep thought. There was no doubt that for the Great Xia, this would be a historic moment. From this moment on, the Great Xia would undergo great changes. This time, he was appointed by Ouyang Shuo as the commander of the 3rd Northern Borderline Army. The alliance between Yufei and Han Shizhong would probably give the Jin Kingdom a headache. Chapter 1069. In addition to the newly formed Northern Frontier Army, Zhang Liang also included the Annan Corps, Yingzhou Corps, Morocco Corps, Somalia Corps, and the Auckland Corps. The positions of these corps were the same as the Northern Frontier Army. Of the 4 corps formed from the Goryeo prisoners of war, 3 were allocated to the Northern Frontier Army, and the remaining 1 was left to the Annan Corps. Currently, the Annan Corps had 3 corps, and Ouyang Shuo was preparing to expand it to its full strength. In the battle between Nanzhong and Chenla, because the two sides were not on the same level, the Dragon Stallion Army and the Annan Corps suffered relatively few casualties. However, the Royal Guard to the 2 game zones added up to only 180,000 people. After the battle, after deducting the casualties and filtering out the unqualified soldiers, there were only 100,000 qualified prisoners of war. It was only enough to form a field corps. After the Annan Corps was full, it was promoted to a corps like the Northern Frontier Army and renamed the Hanoi Army. Nanzhong and Chenla will be divided into prefectures, and together with the current Annan Province, they will form a new province, Hanoi Province. The provincial governor will still be Hu Zongxian, and the administrative center will still be in Hanoi, Ouyang Shuo said. After the merger, Hanoi Province will become a very important super province in the dynasty. Ouyang Shuo believed that with Hu Zongxian's ability and Lu Xiufu's assistance, they would be able to govern this place well. This was where the name Hanoi Army came from. The former commander of the Annan Corps, Shui Rengui, will be promoted to the commander of the Hanoi Army with the rank of 2nd rank Southern General. Shui Rengui and Yu Fei, one guarding the south and the other guarding the north, complemented each other. At this point, the arrangements after the war came to an end for the time being. In the meantime, Ouyang Shuo specially met with the surrendered general of Goryeo, Li Sun-sin. This old general was rather stubborn and was unwilling to hold a post in the Xi'an Navy. Helpless, Ouyang Shuo arranged for Li Sun-sin to teach in the Navy school. Consider it as making use of the remaining heat. During the reorganization of the Hanoi Army, the Dragon Stallion Army would replace the Leopard Army and station in Lavik City on Luzon Island. They would continue to fight against Luzon, and while defending the city, they would constantly whittle down Luzon's military strength. At the right time, the Xia would launch a general attack on Luzon. Following the destruction of Nanzhong, Chenla, Mali, and East Timor, the Xia gained a firm foothold in the north of Luzon. The situation of the entire ASEAN changed again, and it was bound to undergo a new period of adjustment. The first to make a move was Siam, which bordered the Great Xia Inner River Province. On the 9th of July, the day after Ouyang Shuo returned to the capital, the envoy sent by the Lord of Siam, Tirade, arrived at Shanghai City. They brought the Siam's letter of credence, expressing their willingness to recognize Great Xia as their suzerain. With the destruction of South Palm and Chenla, the non-aggression treaty signed by Siam and Xia could no longer give Siam a sense of security. Fearing that it would follow in the footsteps of the other 2 countries, it took the initiative to surrender. It's better to recognize a sovereign state than to be destroyed. Tirade was quite astute. In this war, New Zealand was able to escape because Auckland recognized Great Xia as its suzerain. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to defend against the Luzon Kingdom's attack. From the looks of it, recognizing a suzerain was actually a very good deal. There was more than 1 month of war. Even if they could avoid it, they couldn't avoid it forever. Moreover, Great Xia launched a war against the Luzon kingdom right after the month of war ended. They didn't even need to wait for a year. Based on this judgment, Tyrad sent out an envoy not long after the month of war ended. Since Siam was so tactful, Ouyang Shua naturally wouldn't deliberately make things difficult for them. As mentioned previously, if Great Xia wanted to establish a foothold on Planet Hope, they couldn't really go down the path of massacring the entire world. One more friend was always better than one more enemy. The setting of a suzerain was very much in line with Great Xia's requirements. While forming an alliance of interests, they didn't need to start a war and become enemies with the neighboring countries. Now, let's see how long Piao and Johor can last. Once Piao and Johor submitted and conquered the Luzon kingdom, the entire ASEAN region would be completely under Great Xia's control. However, these two countries probably wouldn't admit defeat so easily unless they were in a desperate situation. Especially Johor, they had just conquered the Luzon kingdom, which meant that they weren't without ambition. They probably wouldn't give in so easily. This was also within Ouyang Shua's expectations. After all, there was a price to pay for recognizing Great Xia as a suzerain. Take Siam as an example. After recognizing Great Xia as a suzerain, although Siam still retained its name, it was actually a province of Great Xia. Lord Tyrad of Siam was appointed as the governor of Siam. The structure of the governor's office would be modified according to Great Xia's model. Some of the agencies would even be directly stationed by Great Xia. The provincial administration would also be moved from the original main city of the territory to the royal city of Bangkok. Of course, compared to other provinces, Siam still enjoyed a high degree of autonomy. Since it was a province of Great Xia, trade tariffs would naturally be reduced to zero. A large number of Great Xia products would flow into Siam without any obstacles. At the same time, Siam's unique raw materials and agricultural products, such as tin, ore, fluorite, rubber, and rice, would also be sold to the provinces of Great Xia. This was greatly beneficial to the dynasty's economy. Then, there was the large-scale disarmament. The 500,000 imperial guards in the royal city of Bangkok, as well as the 200,000 territorial troops, would be completely disbanded, except for the 20,000 royal troops. The remaining 680,000 troops would be completely disbanded. They would either be converted to the garrison division, the city garrison, or to government laborers, or directly transferred to civilian work. As for the security of Siam, Hanoi's army would naturally be responsible for it. Without disarmament, there would be no way to submit. Although Tyrad was mentally prepared, he was still distressed by the sudden reduction of 600,000 to 700,000 troops. Of course, this was only for Tyrad. For the entire Siam, disarmament would only be beneficial. The imperial guards in the royal city were allocated according to the ratio of 1:10, which was a huge burden for the royal city and the people. After disarmament, the royal city would be able to go into battle lightly, reduce taxes, and better invest in the construction of the people's livelihood. The 5 years of Gaia could be seen as a watershed in the game world. Before that, hegemony and war were the core themes of the wilderness. They were even the only themes. After that, the development of internal affairs and economic construction would gradually gain the upper hand and then replace war as the new mainstream. For a dynasty with a vast territory like Great Xia, for the people in the provinces far away from the border, war had gradually faded from their daily lives. Take Shanghai City, for example. Except for the period of hegemony in the Lianzhou Basin, there had been no war for several years. In the foreseeable future, war would no longer occur here. Of course, staying away from war didn't mean that war had been forgotten. As long as the dynasty needed it, with Great Xia's efficient administrative system and developed military industry, the millions of soldiers who had been demobilized and transferred to civilian work could soon be recruited into the army again, and they could immediately enter the battlefield. This was a scary thing about Great Xia. Usually, only a certain number of the most elite troops were kept. While saving military expenses, more soldiers were hidden among the people, promoting the county's construction and economic development. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Even territories like Handan City couldn't learn this model, because Handan City couldn't even gather enough soldiers to expand its army. How could it talk about disarmament? Only a dynasty like Great Xia, which was constantly expanding, could accumulate such a shocking amount of power. It didn't seem to be obvious, but in fact, it was already a supergiant. This was also one of the reasons why Siam didn't dare to start a war with Great Xia despite having 700,000 troops. If this continued, Great Xia would snowball and become more and more terrifying, more and more feared. Sometimes, they didn't even need to send troops, and they could kill people without a trace, subduing the enemy without a fight. This was the true aura of a king. The submission of Siam undoubtedly provided a model for the neighboring countries of Great Xia. It was a very strong example. He believed that after Siam's development was on the right track, there would be people who would be tempted. Once this news was out, the repercussions would definitely shake the entire game world for 3 days. On the 10th of July, when Han Xian led his troops back to the capital, Ouyang Shuo fulfilled his promise and immediately promoted Han Xian to the rank of general, putting him on the same level as Bai Qi and Li Jing, making him one of the 3 giants of the Great Xia military. This time, Ouyang Shuo made it clear that the Grand Council would have a rotating Grand Council minister who would be replaced every 6 months to preside over the daily operations of the Grand Council. The rotating Grand Council minister would only rotate among the 3 generals, Bai Qi, Han Xian, and Li Jing. In this way, it was equivalent to using this system to officially establish the status of these 3 people in the Grand Council, or even in the entire Great Xia army. The god of war Bai Qi, the immortal soldier Han Xian, and the god of war Li Jing. These 3 names were destined to be engraved in the history of Great Xia. Once this news was out, Sun Bin, Li Mu, and the others might be a little disappointed. This was something that couldn't be helped. The military had always judged heroes based on ability and merit. Although the few commanders were all ranked among the top 10 generals in history, Bai, Han, and Li Jing were slightly stronger. Their abilities were more comprehensive, and they were favored by Ouyang Shuo. The others could only sigh helplessly. At this moment, a system announcement suddenly sounded. Chapter 1070. System Announcement. Congratulations to player Di Chun for successfully establishing the Great Zhou dynasty. His year is Jian Yuan, and he has become the 2nd lord in the China server to ascend to the throne. He has been rewarded with 80,000 achievement points, 150,000 reputation points, 3 million gold, and a special reward. Congratulations! The announcement marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Huaxia. Ouyang Shuo was already mentally prepared for this because 3 days ago, Di Chun had already sent out invitations to all the big shots from all over the world to participate in the coronation ceremony. Great Xia was also invited. Ouyang Shuo did not go. Instead, Zhang Yi, the Chamberlain of Dependencies, led the group to attend the ceremony. The aftermath of the Battle of Japan had yet to dissipate. Although the 4 great clans had mobilized a large number of navy in an attempt to clear Handan City's name, it still had a very negative impact on the players. As a result, the coronation ceremony of the Great Zhou dynasty was much quieter than the Great Xia dynasty. Even so, with the establishment of the Great Zhou dynasty to Handan City, to the 4 great clans, and to the original Yanhuang alliance, it was a very impressive achievement. Their integration reached a whole new level, forming a true community of interests. On the day of his ascension to the throne, Di Chun, in the name of Prince of Zhou, conferred Xiongba the title of Marquis Wu, Zhang Lang the title of Marquis Qi, Lord Chunshan the title of Marquis Chu, and Sha Paijuan and Piao Linghuan the title of Marquis. The structure of the Great Zhou dynasty was thus set. The name that Di Chun had chosen was also very interesting. Zhou was one of the 3 ancient names. It could be said to be a very good choice. Ouyang Shuo had hesitated before whether he should use this name or not. Great Zhou Emperor also meant to be the ruler of the world. It was clear that Di Chun's ambition was not extinguished. Another point was that the Zhou dynasty implemented the enfeoffment system. Presently, Xiongba, Zhanlang, and Lord Chunxin were conferred the title of Marquis. It could be seen that the structure of the Great Zhou dynasty would follow the Zhou dynasty's enfeoffment system. I wonder if there will be another spring and autumn warring states period. In the afternoon of July 10th, Dali. Perhaps it was in response to the establishment of the Great Zhou dynasty. Great Xia's arrangements in Dali City were officially retracted. The Crown Prince of Dali, Duan Yu, announced the results of the investigation into the assassination of the late emperor. The culprit was the mutant prince, Duan Hong. Because the evidence was irrefutable, Duan Hong could not refute it. Once the news came out, the entire court was shaken. The imperial guards of Dali could no longer remain indifferent. Under Duan Yu's command, they captured every member of Duan Hong's clan and brought them to justice, awaiting execution at a later date. Duan Hong and the others wanted to escape through the transmission formation, but they did not know that they had already been blocked by the Fallen Leaves Alliance. It was rare for Ouyang Shua to be so ruthless. The reason why he massacred the Duan Hong clan this time was, firstly, to resolve the previous grudges, and secondly, to issue a warning to the Silver Hand. This was also a warning to the aristocratic families attached to the Silver Hand. If you want to stand on the opposite side of the Great Xia, you must be prepared to be exterminated. Can they afford to take such a risk? July 11th. After successfully eliminating Duan Hong's clan, just when the courtiers of Dali thought that Duan Yu would take advantage of the situation to ascend to the throne, Duan Yu suddenly announced, "In accordance with the will of the late emperor, I am willing to abdicate the throne and submit to Great Xia." As soon as the news came out, there was another great commotion. Fortunately, the Great Xia was well prepared. Ouyang Shua personally went to Dali and held a formal abdication ceremony under the auspices of the cabinet chief Jiang Shang and the attention of the former civil and military officials of Dali. Duan Yu presented the imperial seal of Dali and the letter of credence, while Ouyang Shua gave Duan Yu the seal of the Marquis of Dali and the imperial edict. The relationship between the monarch and the subject was thus established. Seeing that the Duan family of Dali had admitted defeat, as the subjects, what else could they say? Moreover, this was the will of the late emperor. Even if someone was unwilling, they could not speak out against it. Things were settled in this way. For a period of time, Jiang Shang and Du Ruhui would stay in Dali. One would be responsible for appeasing the former civil and military officials of Dali, while the other would be responsible for reorganizing the Dali Imperial Guards. July 15th, Yunnan Governor Bai Hua was about to set off for Dali. The Yunnan Governor's office would also be moved to Dali. Before leaving, in Bai Hua's study, Bright Moon illuminates the river and Bai Hua had a conversation. Bright Moon illuminates the river asked, "Sister, what are you thinking?" Bai Hua stood by the window, silent. Seeing this, Bright Moon illuminates the river hesitated for a moment, but still said, "There are rumors outside that Ouyang has been unpredictable ever since he ascended to the throne and is wary of allies like you. Now that you have left Lingxi City, the intention behind it is really unsettling. You have to be prepared." "Brother," Bai Hua suddenly interrupted Bright Moon illuminates the river and said faintly, "Brother, if we did not form an alliance with Great Xia, what would have happened to Lingxi City?" This Bright Moon illuminates the river was momentarily speechless. Bai Hua continued, "I will not belittle myself and say that in the Huaxia region, I do not think that I am inferior to any of the lords. But what is the situation in the wilderness now? Even the insufferably arrogant 6 lords of Handan have to band together to warm themselves. Of the tens of thousands of lords in the Huaxia region, only 3 survived in the end. With the development of Great Xia, if not for the alliance, we would have nothing left." Bright Moon illuminates the river was silent. "We should be thankful for the choice we made." Bai Hua's face flashed with a trace of reminiscence. "Although we are not together, Yumi, Violet, Red Eagle, and Qingyi have all found their own stage. Such achievements and status, I wonder how many people are envious." Seeing this, Bright Moon illuminates the river smiled sheepishly. "Look at what you were saying. I am not really suspecting Ouyang. I am just reminding you. Since you know what you are doing, I am relieved. Bai Hua turned and looked at his brother, smiling. I know that brother is doing this out of kindness. Just a little. Bai Hua seemed to want to see through bright moon illuminates the river, and said faintly, right now, the Great Xia is complicated internally, with undercurrents surging. I hope that brother will not forget his original intentions and not be used by others. I know. Bright moon illuminates the river, clenched his fists tightly. Yes, the Great Xia was already a giant beast that was feared by the players of the world, and it involved the interests of tens of millions of people. In the midst of such a whirlpool of interests, who could truly care about their own safety? Bai Hua turned again and looked at the blue sky and white clouds outside the window, saying softly, I hope that brother and the old people will remember this. Lingxi City has long been gone, and we only have one place to go, and that is the Great Xia, and it can only be the Great Xia. Any unnecessary thoughts are extremely dangerous. Looking at the white clouds in the sky, Bai Hua's thoughts were no longer on this. She could see far more clearly than bright moon illuminates the river, and she firmly believed in her own judgment. No matter how much time has passed, Ouyang is still the same Ouyang. That man with lofty vision and majestic actions was definitely not someone who would be swallowed by the throne. Only he could control the throne, and there was no reason for the throne to enslave him. Bai Hua only hoped that she could keep up with his footsteps and not fall behind. Forever. Chapter 1071. Other than starting the process of annexing the capital of China, Dali's submission had another meaning to Great Xia. It was already the 15th day of the 7th month of the 5th year of Gaia. It had been more than a year since the founding of Great Xia, and the promotion of the Great Xia dynasty to the Great Xia Empire had long been on Ouyang Shua's agenda. Ouyang Shua did some calculations. With Dali's submission, the Great Xia dynasty had already fulfilled 7 of the 9 basic conditions to become an empire, leaving only Condition 3 and Condition 9. Condition 3. The dynasty occupies at least a third of the region's territory. According to the rules set by Gaia, Tibet, Western Xia, Western Turkic Khaganate, Mongolia, and the Jin Kingdom were all part of China's territory. This meant that although Great Xia had conquered the entire southern region and was expanding overseas, it still needed to conquer Tibet, Western Turkic Khaganate, Mongolia, and the Jin Kingdom to meet the requirements. Ignoring the Mongols and Western Turkic Khaganate, the most suitable targets were Tibet and the Jin Kingdom. Ouyang Shua had already set his sights on the Jin Kingdom. He instructed the commander of the Northern Frontier Army, Yu Fei, to increase the surveillance of the Jin Kingdom while reorganizing the army. Condition 9. Possess at least one treasure from the Jin Kingdom. This was the condition that gave Ouyang Shua the most headaches. Although he had already obtained Emperor Yu's pendant, he did not know how to trigger the 9 Cauldrons mission. There was a great deal of uncertainty. Of course, Ouyang Shua believed that Gaia would not give him an impossible mission, so he could only wait patiently. In the following week, Ouyang Shua did not stay in the capital. Instead, he went to the newly conquered Northern Frontier Province, Hanoi Province, and Siam to visit the frontline soldiers, appease the local aristocrats, and stabilize the hearts of the people. During this period, Great Xia began a new round of immigration. Ouyang Shua's goal was to bring more than 70% of the players in China under Great Xia's rule. As such, this round of immigration was the largest, and the requirements were relatively low. Great Xia planned to bring in 15 million players to settle in the various counties of Great Xia. Players were especially encouraged to settle in the 6 royal cities of Hanoi, Edo, Seoul, Vientiane, Phnom Penh, and Bangkok. With the help of the various royal cities and satellite cities, they could explore the underworld. The imperial court also gave appropriate evacuation to the players who settled in Dali, alleviating the population pressure in Dali. Compared to the Qin dynasty, Han dynasty, Shu dynasty, Sui dynasty, Tang dynasty, and Song dynasty, not only was Great Xia more powerful and prosperous, but it also understood the players better. Settling down in Great Xia was no longer a difficult task. After this round of immigration, including the original Dali players, the number of Huaxiao players living under the rule of Great Xia would reach 40 million, occupying almost half of the Huaxiao region. In this way, Great Xia's position would be even more unshakable. On the 22nd of July, when Ouyang Shuo was patrolling Siam, a system announcement messed up his plan. He had no choice but to end his trip to Siam in a hurry and return to the capital. System announcement. Congratulations to player Feng Qiuhuang for becoming the third lord in the Huaxia server to become a capital city. You have been awarded 80,000 merit points. Congratulations. World announcement. Congratulations to China's player Feng Qiuhuang for becoming the ninth lord to level up to a capital city. Rewards. 50,000 achievement points, 100,000 reputation points. Congratulations. System announcement. The Huaxia region has been promoted to capital cities, triggering the battle system. The 10th battle, Battle of Qingmia, will officially begin in 3 days. Please look forward to it. Friendly reminder. The battle between the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty is a non-compulsory mission. Only territories that have been promoted to capital cities are eligible to participate. Upon hearing the name of the battle, Ouyang Shuo knew that this would be the last battle in China. After this battle, the last two dynasties, the Ming dynasty and the Qing dynasty, would appear in the wilderness and join the process of history. That's true. Ouyang Shuo smiled bitterly and shook his head. This way, no matter how the northern border army prepared for the battle, they would inevitably be attacked by the Jin Kingdom and the capital county. Gaia had clearly stated in the system announcement that the condition to trigger the battle was for all the territories in the Huaxia region to be promoted to capital cities, not the third one. From this, it could be seen that if Danyang City, Overlord City, and Blood Red City did not join the Great Zhou dynasty, the last battle in the Huaxia region would probably drag on for a long time. Gaia had put in a lot of effort to use the 10 battles to describe the history of Huaxia. As for this particular battle, there were many things to watch out for. Firstly, the battle name, battle between the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty, was a false proposition. This was because the Ming dynasty was not destroyed by the Qing dynasty, but by Li Zicheng. In 1644 AD, in the third month of the 17th year of Chongzhen of the Ming dynasty, the Great Shun army, led by Li Zicheng, captured the capital. Chongzhen Emperor hanged himself on Coal Mountain, marking the end of the Ming dynasty that had ruled Huaxia for 276 years. As for the remnants of the Ming dynasty, it was called the Southern Ming regime. At that time, Huaxia actually had 4 powers. One of them was the Qing dynasty established by the female Taoist, Huang Taiji. It controlled a total of more than 200,000 troops, and the area it controlled was only the Liaodong region and the vicinity of the capital. The one guarding the Shanhai Pass was the Count of Pingxi, Wu Sangye. Other than the Qing, the Southern Ming Hongguang regime in Jianya, the roaming king Li Zicheng's Great Shun regime in Henan, and Sichuan's Zhang Xianzhong's Great Shi regime had more troops than the Qing army, and they occupied the entire south and northwest. The day before the Qing army entered the pass, Huang Taiji suddenly died. Regent Dorgan assessed the situation and formulated a strategy to first take the northwest, then the southeast. That was to gather troops and first consolidate the surrounding areas of Yanjing, then attack Li Zicheng's Great Shun army in the northwest, which posed the greatest threat. After destroying them, they would rely on the vast north to attack the Southern Ming dynasty in the southeast, so as to achieve the goal of breaking them one by one. Therefore, according to Ouyang Shuo's understanding, the Qing dynasty destroyed the Ming dynasty should be the Qing dynasty destroyed the Southern Ming dynasty. Just like the Ming Yuan dynasty's army, in order to maintain its rule, to promote its culture, and to issue the hair-shaving order, the Qing army carried out countless massacres in Huaxia, killing tens of millions of common people. The slogan of the hair-shaving order was, "Keep the head but not the hair, keep the hair but not the head." The most tragic massacre was the 10 Days of Yangzhou, jotting 3 massacres and other massacres, which caused the population of Huaxia to decrease sharply. In many areas, there is no unbroken village in a county, no unbroken home in a village, no unbroken person in a family, no unbroken wife. The 10 Days of Yangzhou was also known as the Yangzhou City Massacre. It referred to the massacre of the common people in Yangzhou after Shi Kefa led Yangzhou's army and people to stop the Qing army from invading the south. According to the survivor Wang Xiuqu's Yangzhou 10 Days Diary and the late Ming historian Juliochi's Southern Lu of the Ming Dynasty, the massacre lasted for 10 days, hence the name Yangzhou 10 Days. Yangzhou fell after fierce resistance. The Qing army massacred and looted and did not stop their sabers for 10 days. The flourishing Yangzhou city of several generations was now piled with corpses, hands and feet piled on top of each other. Blood flowed into the water, turning into 5 colors. The pond was leveled, front, back, left, right, everywhere was burned. Corpses piled up in the city like a tangled hemp. Other than a small number of Yangzhou's common people who escaped before the city was breached, and a few who were lucky enough to escape after the Qing army entered the city, almost all of them were brutally massacred. The number of corpses collected by the monks alone exceeded 800,000. During the Qing dynasty, when literary inquisition was prevalent, all the records regarding the Yangzhou City Massacre were deliberately covered up after the Qing army entered the Han territory, so that most people before the end of the Qing dynasty did not know anything about this massacre. The Jiading 3 massacres took place in 1645 AD. After the Qing army breached Jiading, they carried out 3 massacres of the common people in the city. At that time, the Qing army issued a hair-shaving order. The common people of Jiading refused to obey. The country gentleman Ho Dong once led the Jiading gentry and people to revolt against the Qing. The Qing Wusong Zongbing Li Qingdong immediately led 5,000 troops to attack. The city of Jiading was breached. Li Qingdong gave the order to massacre the whole city. Among the common people, there are those who were hanged from beams, those who jumped into wells, those who threw themselves into the river, those whose faces were covered with blood, those whose limbs were chopped off, those whose limbs were still moving, were uncountable. Their flesh and blood were scattered everywhere. The women in the city were brutally raped. If they resisted, the soldiers would use long nails to nail the resisting women's hands to the door planks, and then they would wantonly rape and rape. The massacre continued for a day, until the river was blocked by the corpses. About 30,000 people were killed. After that, Li Qingdong led his army and left Jiading City. But the calamity of Jiading City was still not over. 3 or 4 days after Li Qingdong's massacre, the lucky survivors of Jiading began to slip back into the city. After they returned to the city, under the leadership of a righteous man called Zhu Ying, they regrouped with a total of more than 2,000 people. Zhu Ying led the survivors to launch a counter-massacre in this broken city, executing the traitors who surrendered to the Qing army and the officials appointed by the Qing army. Li Qingdong also led his soldiers straight into the city, killing many of the common people who were still sleeping, piled up their corpses into a hill, and then set fire to the corpses. The Qing army was in high spirits, and Jiading City suffered the second massacre. More than 20 days later, a general from the southern Ming, called Wu Zhifan, led the rest of his troops to attack Jiading City. The common people in the surrounding area also responded, and the Qing army in the city was routed and fled. Not long after, Li Qingdong reorganized his army and counterattacked, killing hundreds of Wu Zhifan soldiers, and also slaughtering nearly 20,000 common people who had just arrived at Jiading to escape the chaos. Their blood flowed like a river, and they became known as the Third Massacre of Jiading. The Qing army often used the excuse of evil to rebel to slaughter the surrendered army and common people, and those who dared to resist were almost all killed, leaving behind only some obedient slaves. In addition, the Manchurian Qing also killed 1 million Miao people, killed millions of Hui people, and killed the Zungar tribe of Mongolia in the north of the desert until only 1 child was left. This cruelty was rarely seen in the history of the world. Chapter 1072, July 25th, Shanghai City. In the blink of an eye, the final battle of the Huaxiao region was about to begin. This time, Great Xia's 100,000-strong army was the same as the Battle of Cliff Mountain. It included the Royal Navy, the 4th Imperial Guard Corps, and the 3,000 Divine Guards. In addition, Ouyang Shuo had also appointed the commander of the Flying Bear Army, Li Jing, and the secretary of the Secretariat, Jia Su, to follow the army. He had a faint premonition that this battle would not be simple. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the system announcement rang. System announcement. In the year 1645, the second year of Xuanji of the Qing dynasty, after the Qing dynasty destroyed the Great Shun regime, they turned south and attacked the Hongguang regime of the Southern Ming dynasty. The two sides fought for several months and finally ended with the destruction of the Hongguang regime. The 10th epic battle, the Battle of the Qing dynasty against the Ming dynasty, officially begins. Checking the conditions for participating in the battle, assigning the participating troops, system notification. In the epic campaign, the Qing dynasty war against the Ming dynasty is divided into the Qing dynasty faction and the Ming dynasty faction. Please choose your faction. Special note: if you choose the faction that was defeated in history and reverse the historical ending, players in this faction will receive additional rewards. Please choose wisely. I will choose the Ming dynasty camp. System notification. Faction selection complete. Teleportation beginning. After experiencing a short period of dizziness, Ouyang Shuo and the others appeared on the battlefield. System notice: welcome player not wearing anything to the Ming dynasty's main camp, Jianya. The moment he appeared, Ouyang Shuo saw Feng Qiuhuang and teased, "You're the main character this time." Feng Qiuhuang shrugged and said innocently, "I didn't know that a war campaign would be triggered." He then asked worriedly, "Will the sudden outbreak of war affect Great Xia's deployment in the north?" Ouyang Shuo waved his hand and said with a smile, "Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Why care about him?" "That's true." Feng Qiuhuang immediately changed the topic. Up until this point in the game, the two of them had been through a lot. This little accident wasn't enough to make them flustered. The conversation just now was more teasing than practical. Just as Ouyang Shuo met up with Feng Qiuhuang, he heard a series of battle announcements. Battle announcement. 3 feudal lords participated in the battle between the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty, with a total of 300,000 soldiers. The Qing camp has 1 lord and a total army of 100,000. The Ming camp has 2 lords and a total army of 200,000. This was the quietest and most fair battle. The 3 lords were equally matched, each commanding 100,000 troops, and were about to start a slaughter on the battlefield map. As for Di Chun choosing the Qing dynasty's camp, Ouyang Shuo wasn't surprised at all. Firstly, after experiencing the Ensure Rebellion, Di Chun would be 100 times unwilling to be in the same camp as Ouyang Shuo, because he had no sense of existence. Secondly, Di Chun probably wanted to get closer to the Qing dynasty. The sudden outbreak of the war between the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty had undoubtedly given the Great Zhou dynasty the opportunity to unite with the Jingdou County and keep the northern frontier province in check. Taking 10,000 steps back, the choice of a war camp had nothing to do with good or evil. How could Di Chun hesitate? Battle announcement. Due to the Qing dynasty's military strength being weaker than the Ming dynasty's, according to the rules, the Qing dynasty will receive a 45% increase in defense. 1 against 2, 100,000 against 200,000. This time, Di Chun was probably under some pressure. Thankfully, Gaia was always fair. Immediately, the 100,000 Great Zhou troops received a 45-point boost in defense. Just based on this point, the Great Zhou army's losses would be halved. Campaign announcement. According to the results of the evaluation of nobility and merit points, the representative of the Qing dynasty camp is Duke Di Chun. The representative of the Qing dynasty camp is called "How Can You Say That You Have No Clothes?" Wang Zhu. This had become the norm. Only after the campaign announcement ended did Ouyang Shuo have the time to observe their surroundings. The place where the 200,000 troops appeared was the West Barracks outside Jianya City. Another 2 li to the west was the surging Yangtze River. Down the Yangtze River, less than 100 li, was one of the main battlefields, Yangzhou. The Jianghuai River Valley had always been the southern region's natural barrier. The Huai River was located between the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers. It flowed to Yangzhou's Jiangdu district, passing through the Three Rivers Barracks into the Yangtze River. Since ancient times, those who guarded the Yangtze River had to guard the Huai River. Losing the Huai River Valley was fatal to the southern Ming. This was because the Yangtze River was a natural transportation route. If the battlefront was by the Yangtze River, then the North and South could use the Yangtze River to transport troops and supplies. The Yangtze River was a natural barrier shared by both sides, so the South had no advantage. Once the South could defend the Huai River, then the Yangtze River would be the sole transportation route of the Southern regime. In an era where transportation relied on foot and animal power, if they could use ships, then it would be a huge advantage in terms of logistics. There was another point. Under the situation where the Jianghuai region had yet to be consolidated, once the Qing army crossed the Yangtze River, they would be in a hopeless situation. If they won, it would be fine. If they couldn't win, there would be enemies in Jiangbei. With strong enemies in front and no way out, they could only jump into the river. Once Jianghuai was occupied by the Qing army, the 1,000-li Yangtze River defense line could be broken through at any point. Even if they failed once, they could retreat to Jiangbei without any losses. On the other hand, the Southern Ming army would be very troubled. The battlefront was too long, and it was impossible to defend the entire line. One mistake, one failure, or the garrison at a key place rebelled and surrendered. The Qing army would immediately have the momentum of 1,000,000 soldiers marching down Jiangnan. In history, the Qing army broke through Yangzhou, took the Huai River Valley, and entered the Yangtze River. Without a natural barrier, it was normal for Jianye to fall, but the historical facts were the same. In the first month of the second year of Xuanji, Duo transferred troops from Shi into the southeast and attacked the Hongguang regime. In the third month, the Qing army captured Guide. In the fourth month, they divided their troops to attack Shuzhou and Boizhou. The Ming military supervisor, Shi Kefa, commanded the soldiers and civilians to resist to the death in Yangzhou. They held out for 10 days before the city was broken and he was killed. After that, the Qing army met almost no resistance. In the fifth month, the Qing army crossed the Yangtze River and occupied Jianye. They captured Zhu Yuzong in Wuhu, and the Hongguang regime fell. The battle lasted less than half a year. The only highlight was the Battle of Yangzhou. I wonder if Yangzhou is still there. Ouyang Shua's gaze was distant. Although he was deceiving himself, if possible, Ouyang Shua did not want the 10 days of Yangzhou to happen again. Let's go into the city. After handing the troops to Li Jing, Guozi, and the others to settle, Ouyang Shua brought the divine martial guards and Feng Qiuhuang into Jianye under the lead of the garrison general. Great Shun was destroyed, and the Qing army went south, committing many atrocities. At that moment, Jianye city was already in a state of panic. Since there were passionate people who sang sorrowful songs, there was naturally no lack of people who surrendered with ulterior motives. Looking through history, the person who gave Ouyang Shua the deepest impression was the current Minister of Rights, Qian Qiani. As the leader of the aristocratic families in Jiangnan, his bones were soft and cheap. It was unbelievable. In the fifth month of the second year of Xuanji, the Qing army approached Jianye. Liu Rushi persuaded Qian Qiani to die for his country, but Qian Qiani could not. On the 15th day of the fifth month, not only did Qian Qiani shamelessly accept the surrender, but he also shaved his hair in advance. At that time, the governor of Hunan, Yu Qijia, who was on good terms with Qian Qiani, and the governor of Hunan, Yuan Shu, who was on good terms with Qian Qiani, swore not to be Qing officials and died on hunger strike. As the leader of the aristocratic families, he was naturally shameless to such an extent. Chapter 1073. Qian Qiani, who had no moral integrity, was just a microcosm of that era. The one who died was neither Li Zicheng's Great Shun nor Dorgan's Great Qing, but the Ming dynasty itself. In the middle and late Ming dynasty, the Donglin clique rebelled and fought against each other. After Chongzhen hanged himself, the crown prince did not follow the ancestral system to supervise the country in Jianya, resulting in Chongzhen's death. The crown prince and Chongzhen's son were all captured, and the throne could only be passed on according to the rule of the elder brother. At that time, the first candidate was Prince Fu, Prince Gui, supported by Shi Kafa and the others, and Prince Lu, supported by Donglin clique. The three princes and their supporters fought each other, completely ignoring the situation in the north, giving the Great Qing sufficient time to establish a foothold in North China and wipe out the Great Shun army. In the end, Prince Fu won the support of Jianya's main armed forces, the four towns of Jiangbei, Gao, Jia, Huangdigong, Lulianzhua, and Luziqing, and became a victor. He ascended the throne and was known as the Hongguang Emperor. Zhu Yosong's request for help from the four towns' warlords had a major impact on the situation in the future. The most direct effect was to fulfill his wish and smoothly ascend to the supreme throne, and the indirect effect was that the towns of Jiangbei regarded themselves as the benefactor of the Son of Heaven and the hero of the dragon. From the emperor to the ministers of Jianya, no one could control this domineering army, and from then on, the southern Ming warlords were unable to get rid of their power. Gao Jia, Huangdigong, Lulianzhua, and the others were all brave men from the army, and their subordinates each had their own worries, but there was no lack of good generals and brave men. If Zhu Yuzong had a little of the experience of his ancestors, as long as he controlled it well, he could completely rely on the four towns' support to exert influence and make the four towns work for him. Unfortunately, Zhu Yuzong inherited his father's broad heart and fat body, but did not inherit his ancestors' military strategy. Because of the internal strife during the Battle of Yangzhou, Shi Kafa defended the city, but the four towns of Jiangbei watched from the sidelines and did not help, ultimately leading to the historical tragedy of the 10 days of Yangzhou. After the fall of Jianya, the Prince of Lu of Hangzhou, Zhu Changqi, the Prince of Yi of Fuzhou, Zhu Si, the Prince of Jingjiang of Guilin, Zhu Hongjia, and other regent regimes were established one after another. However, they were all short-lived and ended within a few days. On the way to the imperial palace, Ouyang Shua discussed the situation of the war with Feng Xiaohuang and said, "If we want to reverse the situation, just the 200,000 soldiers we brought with us is far from enough. We have to rely on the natives. The four towns of Jiangbei, the remnants of the Great Shun army, and even the Great Shi army are all targets that we can fight for." Feng Xiaohuang wasn't completely clueless. She asked, "These fellows have their own thoughts. Will they listen to us?" Of course not. Ouyang Shah wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could show off his domineering aura on the battlefield and make the various warlords bow down to him. On the battle map, no one cared about Emperor Xia. If we want to subdue them, we need to have an army. 200,000 soldiers is our biggest bargaining chip. Secondly, you need to have a good battle record. If you don't show them your skills, how will they be convinced? After pausing for a while, Ouyang Shua continued, "More importantly, we need to raise a flag so that the various warlords can temporarily stop their internal strife and work together to suppress the Qing army." Feng Xiaohuang said, "This is not easy. It is not easy." Ouyang Shua nodded. "Rome wasn't built in a day. We don't have much time to waste here. We can only combine strength and gentleness. If necessary, we still need to use some thunderous methods. Do as you see fit." Feng Xiaohuang was very straightforward and followed Ouyang Shua's lead. When Ouyang Shua heard this, he shook his head in amusement. He'd heard that Huaxia region's sole remaining female lord would very soon become Huaxia region's first queen, and that she'd used many thunderous methods in East River Province. As they were talking, the two of them had already entered the imperial palace. In the main hall, Emperor Hongguang sat on the throne, but he didn't have much of a high-spirited feeling. The civil and military officials in the hall looked at them with different expressions. Some were vigilant, some were probing, some were passionate, and so on. A big pot of hodgepodge. Ouyang Shua came to such a conclusion. In front of the civil officials, Ouyang Shua saw the notorious Minister of Rights, Qian Qiani. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If this person didn't die, Ouyang Shua's trip would be in vain. Following that, the meeting between Ouyang Shua and Emperor Hongwang seemed calm, but it caused the officials to feel a surge of emotions. They looked at each other in dismay. Ouyang Shua acknowledged the legitimacy of Emperor Hongwang and was willing to protect and defend this legitimacy. The 200,000 mutant army under his command became the biggest bargaining chip of Emperor Hongwang against the 4 towns of Jiangbei. This was Ouyang Shua's brilliance. The Southern Ming Empire's regime changed frequently, and there was internal strife. One of the reasons was that there wasn't a trustworthy authority to rule over the 4 sides. This gave other people the space to play. If Ouyang Shua copied the Ensure Rebellion or the Battle of Cliff Mountain from the start, or abolished the Emperor Hongwang, or left Emperor Hongwang aside and started anew, it would only worsen the internal strife and be of no help. There was an old saying, if you want to take something, you must give it back. Ouyang Shua could only stabilize Emperor Hongwang and put him on a pedestal. Only then could he realize his strategic intentions. There was a big premise for him to do this. Although Emperor Hongwang didn't have great military talent, he was not a fool. Sure enough, after receiving Ouyang Shua's loyalty, Emperor Hongwang was delighted. He immediately returned the favor and appointed Ouyang Shua as the regent of Southern Ming. When Feng Xiuhuang saw this, she could only sigh in admiration. After the meeting, the news of the imperial court appointing Ouyang Shua as the regent spread throughout the country. This is interesting. Great Qing had a regent Dorgan, while Southern Ming had a regent Ouyang Shua. No one knew what kind of sparks would be produced from the confrontation between the two. Just when the warlords thought that the newly appointed regent would start a new official making 3 changes, burning down the 4 towns in Jiangbei or reorganizing the court, Ouyang Shua did not make any movements. Rows of carriages were parked in front of the mansion that Emperor Hongwang bestowed upon Ouyang Shua. They were all rushing to pay their respects to the regent. Among them, there were soldiers who sincerely served the country and opportunists like Qian Qianyi. But no matter who it was, they were all given a cold shoulder. The divine martial guards that guarded the mansion emitted a ferocious aura, as well as the faint smell of slaughter and blood. This caused the visitors to shrink back. No one dared to be impudent. This made the cautious Gao Jie, Huang Digong, and the other warlords even more anxious. They thought that the regent was preparing a big move and was preparing to catch them all in one fell swoop. It was no wonder that Gao Jie and the others were so nervous. This regent of Ouyang Shua wasn't an ordinary person. His authority didn't come from the Emperor Hongwang, but from the 200,000 troops behind him. Although they didn't know how strong they were, just the appearance of the army was enough to make people fearful. Facing such an opponent, how could Gao Jie and the others not be careful? Just when the outside world was guessing, Ouyang Shua was hosting a military meeting in the mansion. Chapter 1074. Li Jing, Jia Su, Eli, Admiral Zhou Yu of the Royal Navy, Commander Gazi of the Blazing Flame Army, and Commander Zhou Bo of the 4th Legion of the Blazing Flame Army. The lineup was grand. Some of them had worked together before, and some were working together for the first time. Li Jing, in particular, had only worked with Eli in the Battle of Goryeo and was considered familiar with him. He did not know much about the other generals. The Royal Navy led by Zhou Yu was currently docked by the Yangtze River and could set off at any time. The one speaking was Ouyang Shua. According to the information from the Ministry of War, the vanguard of the Qing Duoduo Division has set up camp 20 li away from Yangzhou under the command of Nikan. This is the most crucial battle, and there can be no mistakes. After the military conference, the army will immediately reinforce Yangzhou. If there are no accidents, the 100,000 soldiers of the Great Zhou dynasty will also follow. In addition to the 100,000 soldiers of the Duoduo Division and the 50,000 soldiers of the Gushin Urjin Junta Division, as well as the expected surrendered troops, this battle will not be easy. Speaking of this, Ouyang Shua was full of resentment towards the 4 towns of Jiangbei. When the Gushin Urjin Junta Division arrived at Huai and City, the Count of Dongping and Commander Lu Ziqing had already fled. The Count of Jingnan and Commander Huang Digong were still in Tongling. The Count of Guangchong and Commander Lu Liang Zhua had fled to Jianye. As for the Count of Xingping and Commander Gao Jie, other than Deputy Commander Zhuang Zigu, who was still stationed south of Shuzhou, the other generals, such as Deputy Commander Li Qingdong and Deputy Commander Yang Shengwu, had already abandoned the city and fled south. The vanguard of the Qing Duo Division, under the command of Nikan, advanced 50 li every day towards Yangzhou. When Shi Kefa invited the generals to reinforce Yangzhou, only Commander Liu Zhaoji led 4,000 men and Deputy Commander Zhuang Zigu led 700 men. The entire garrison of Yangzhou was less than 10,000 men. This meant that the mutant army had to fight against the 250,000 Qing soldiers alone. If the 200,000 soldiers all went to battle, they might be able to fight. The key was that there was still a unit left to guard Jianye. Although Ouyang Shuo has been conferred the title of regent, he does not have an army by his side, so he will not be able to stand firm. Once the mutant army completely retreats, Lu Liang, who has escaped to Jianye, will be in trouble. Furthermore, Ouyang Shuo was also responsible for collecting provisions for the army in Jianye. The newly established Southern Ming Empire was a mess. Its treasury was empty and could not support such a huge war. The only way was to fight the local tyrants, which would require the assistance of the army. Based on a rough estimate, the reinforcements sent to Yangzhou this time, including the Royal Navy, could not exceed 150,000. They had to leave 50,000 elites to hold down the fort in Jianye. After some discussion, Ouyang Shuo decided that Guizi would lead the 100,000 soldiers of the Blazing Flame Army to the north together with the Royal Fleet led by Zhou Yu and the 30,000 Imperial Guards led by Eli. The remaining 40,000 Imperial Guards were temporarily led by Li Jing. They guarded Jianye together with the 3,000 Divine Martial Guards. Before leaving, Ouyang Shuo exhorted, "Although the Battle of Yangzhou is a crucial battle, it's only the first battle. After protecting Yangzhou, it's time to launch an all-out counterattack against the Great Qing." "Yes, sir." Guizi, Zhou Yu, Eli, and the other generals bowed and took their leave. Beside the Yangtze River, Ouyang Shuo gazed at the army that was gradually getting further and further away. "I wonder if it's too late." In the historical Battle of Yangzhou, the vanguard of the Duo Division was not in a hurry to attack the city. Even when the main force of the Duo Division arrived outside Yangzhou and surrounded the city, they did not immediately start the battle. The reason was very simple. The Eight Banners Army was mainly composed of cavalry and was not suitable for attacking a city. They had to wait for the Red Barbarian cannons transported by the Divine Arms Battalion to arrive at the battlefield before they could attack the city. The facts prove that Yangzhou, which was not considered a strong city, only managed to defend for a day and a night under the bombardment of the Red Barbarian cannons. It was not strong at all. Shi Kefa was a person of good moral integrity, but in terms of ability, he was questionable and could not be counted on. Now that Di Chun had joined the battle, there were many variables in the Battle of Yangzhou. No matter what, Ouyang Shuo could only choose to trust Guizi and the other generals and adapt to the situation on the battlefield. Let's go back. We still have a lot of things to do. Ouyang Shuo retracted his gaze and rode Little Qing back into the city. If Ouyang Shuo wanted to lead the Southern Ming Empire in a successful counterattack, the first thing he had to do was to eliminate the capitulators within the Southern Ming Empire and carry out a small-scale purge. Other than the army, there was also a special operation team accompanying Ouyang Shuo on the battlefield map. They were elite spies that Ouyang Shuo had specially transferred from the Mountain Sea Guards. During the Enshur Rebellion, Ouyang Shuo had suffered because he did not have spies by his side. Since yesterday, the spies of the Mountain Sea Guards had started to move. With the cooperation of the glorious Light Emperor, and according to historical records, they focused their investigation on the spineless landowning households. Naturally, the Minister of Rights, Qian Qiani, was the first to bear the brunt. In order to not cause a huge commotion and also to stop the outside world from saying that Ouyang Shua had eliminated dissidents and attacked those who did not agree with him as soon as he became the regent, the Mountain Sea Guards had to gather sufficient evidence before they took action. They could either find secret letters with the Great Qing dynasty or evidence of their daily acts of corruption. As long as they did not do anything wrong, they could be used as proof that Ouyang Shua had exterminated their families and confiscated their possessions. They could quickly gather rations for the frontline army and intimidate the people with bad intentions. Speaking of which, how many of these landowning households and ministers were clean? It would be easy to find out. All the investigation and evidence collection were carried out in secret. Ouyang Shua did not want to alert the enemy. Other than that, Ouyang Shua also did two things. The first thing he did was to send a letter to Zhang Xianzhong, the emperor of Sichuan's Dashi kingdom, in the name of the Southern Ming dynasty's regent. He stated clearly, the Southern Ming dynasty can be destroyed, but China cannot be destroyed. This is the basis of our cooperation. Zhang Xianzhong was also a legendary figure. He was the leader of the peasant army at the end of the Ming dynasty, who was as famous as the roaming king Li Zicheng. He came from a poor family and had been smart and stubborn since he was young. He had followed his father to start a small business, selling dates. Zhang Xianzhong had been a constable before he came to Yansui town and became a border soldier. This person was unyielding and loved to fight for justice. He had almost lost his life because of this. During the Chongzhen era, Zhang Xianzhong organized a peasant army to revolt. In 1640, he led his troops to Sichuan. In 1644, he established the Great Western Regime in Chengdu. In 1646, the Qing army marched south. Zhang Xianzhong led his troops to resist the battle and was killed by a stray arrow on Phoenix Mountain in Shizong. Speaking of which, Li Zicheng and Zhang Xianzhong, this pair of ambitious and ruthless characters, died unjustly. There was no need to talk about Zhang Xianzhong. He had experienced countless battles, big and small, but he was killed by a stray arrow while fighting against the Qing army. How bizarre. Li Zicheng was the same. At the beginning of the 5th month of 1645, when the Great Shun army arrived at the foot of Jiugong Mountain in Tongcheng, Hubei, Li Zicheng led more than 20 light cavalry to climb the mountain to explore the way. He was killed by the local militia, Jiang Dian, and his body was secretly buried. Wasn't this injustice? The roaming king of a generation was actually killed by a group of militia while exploring the way. There seemed to be heaven's will in the dark. Li Zicheng and Zhang Xianzhong, this pair of rebel leaders, when they were fighting against the Ming dynasty, they were like the wind and clouds. They fought for several thousand li and fought countless battles, yet they were still alive and well. But once they fought against the Qing army, each and every one of them was possessed by a god of misfortune and died inexplicably. It could be said that the Great Qing's title of king, who picks up loopholes and king of the last stab, was not just a name. Sometimes history is such a coincidence. If Li Zicheng and Zhang Xianzhong did not die like that, perhaps it would be a different situation. Zhang Xianzhong rebelled against the Ming, but he also resisted the Qing. He was not like Qian Qianni and Lu Zicheng who surrendered. It was after Zhang Xianzhong's death that his subordinate son Kuang and the others led the Great Western Army south to join forces with the Southern Ming to fight against the Qing army. They fought in the southwest provinces for nearly 20 years, all the way until the early years of Kangxi in the Qing dynasty. Because of this, Ouyang Shua had the confidence to persuade Zhang Xianzhong. Chapter 1075. The second thing Ouyang Shua did was to send people to contact the remnants of the Great Shun army. Just like the Great Western Army, after Li Zicheng's death, the remainder of the Great Shun army, under the leadership of Li Gua, Hao Yaoqi, and Madame Gao, joined forces with the Southern Ming Empire to continue resisting the Qing. The famous Kodong 13 clans were made up of the remnants of the Great Shun army. Ouyang Shua gave the cold shoulder to the 4 towns of Jiangbei and did not force them. As long as Gao Jie and the others were smart, They would not bet on surrendering to the Qing before the Battle of Yangzhou ended. Ouyang Shua's goal was to use the 200,000 mutant soldiers as the core to unite the four towns of Jiangbei, the Great Shi Army, and the remnants of the Great Shun Army to form a united front to counterattack the Qing. To avoid alerting Zhang Xianzhong and the others, Ouyang Shua did not even ask for a joint command. He only arranged the time to use the troops and split up to head north. The prerequisite was that the mutant soldiers had to prove themselves in the Battle of Yangzhou. On the third day of the battle, in Yangzhou City, Guizi's troops were still on their way to Yangzhou City, but Duoduo's troops and Dichen's 100,000 mutant soldiers had already arrived outside Yangzhou City and surrounded the city. In the end, they did not make it in time. Not only that, but Dichun seemed to have foresight and brought over 100 cannons. The Qing army did not even need to wait for the Divine Strategy Battalion. The moment they surrounded the city, they attacked Yangzhou City amidst the cannons. Boom, boom, boom. Because Dichun, who was familiar with history, knew that Shirkufa would not surrender, Duoduo did not even need to summon him and directly ordered the attack. Yangzhou City's earthen walls could not withstand the bombardment and quickly collapsed. The city was in an uproar. In just one morning, Yangzhou City was declared to have fallen. Liu Zhaoji died in battle. Yangzhou's magistrate, Ren Minyu, He Gang, and the others sacrificed themselves. Shirkufa committed suicide. History seemed to be repeating itself. The only difference was that because the siege was unusually smooth and Dichen's persuasion, the Qing army did not massacre the city. Instead, they started to prepare the city's defenses to deal with Guizi's troops. On this matter, Dichun was still very rational. Firstly, Guizi's troops were already on their way to Yangzhou. Massacring the city now would be akin to digging their own graves. Secondly, although Dichun was from an aristocratic family, he was still a child of Huaxia. He was not really cold-hearted. Dichun was still young, unlike his grandfather, who had copper skin and iron bones. This is troublesome. After knowing that Yangzhou City had been breached, Guizi ordered his troops to stop and rest. That night, in the Central Army tent. "What do you think we should do next?" Guizi asked Jiasu. Jiasu said, "The city of Yangzhou has been breached. The four towns of Jiangbei may surrender to the Qing army at any time. The situation is very unfavorable for us. We must think of a way to reverse it. However, with our 130,000 soldiers defending Yangzhou City, we can still fight. Now that the Qing army has occupied Yangzhou, we suddenly change from defending the city to attacking the city is difficult." Guizi was speechless. "Does the military advisor have a good plan?" Guizi asked eagerly. Jiasu, on the other hand, was unhurried and said, "Since we can't take it down, then we might as well give up." "Give up?" Guizi frowned. "Counselor, do you mean to retreat in order to advance?" Jiasu nodded. "The accompanying royal fleet is a trump card. With the fleet accompanying us, our army can go around Yangzhou City, go against the Huai River, and take over the Huai River Valley." The Huai River Valley was the barrier of the Yangtze River, bypassing the main force of the Qing army. Guizi indeed had the confidence to recover the Jianghuai region in a short period of time. The problem was, what about the provisions? The main force of the Qing army reached Yangzhou City so quickly. The follow-up troops will not be so fast. As long as we move quickly, there's a high chance that we can intercept the enemy's provisions and use them for us. Jiasu's eyes were really sharp. As long as we intercept the first batch of provisions, the subsequent provisions can be gathered on the spot. Hearing this, Guizi sighed and nodded, but still could not dispel her doubts. She continued to ask, "Even if we solve the problem of provisions, leaving 250,000 Qing soldiers in Yangzhou City is still very inappropriate. The enemy can go south and directly take Jianya, or they can go north to chase after us, putting us in a passive position." Jiasu smiled and said, "It is fine if the enemy is holed up in Yangzhou City. Once they leave the city, whether they go north or south, it will be an opportunity for us." "What do you mean?" "If the Qing army goes south and directly takes Jianya, There are 40,000 Imperial Guards in Jianya City, and there is also Lu Liang's left division. With the advantage of Jianya City, the enemy will not be able to easily take Jianya like they attacked Yangzhou. Unlike Yangzhou, Jianya City was also equipped with a large number of cannons. If the Qing army wanted to attack Yangzhou and take down Jianya in a morning, it was simply wishful thinking. In history, Jianya surrendered without a fight, and Ouyang Shuo was personally guarding Jianya in the battle map. What could Qin Xini and the rest do? There was absolutely no reason for them to surrender. Guozi also agreed with Jia Su's judgment. As long as Jianya can hold out for a few days, our army can take advantage of the situation and go south. Not only can we take back Yangzhou, but we can also cooperate with Jianya's garrison to attack the Qing army from the north and south. The battle situation will naturally be in our favor, Jia Su explained. Guozi nodded. What if the Qing army goes north? Jia Su smiled. It will be easier to go north. The northern territory is vast, especially the Jianghuai region. However, the Qing army has just occupied it, and its foundation is not stable. There are many anti-Qing forces there. We can play hide and seek with the Qing army and attack them separately. When your majesty subdues the rest of the great Shun army, the enemy will be destroyed. Hearing this, Guozi finally felt relieved. Jia Su continued, there's another advantage to our army going around Yangzhou City. Before Gao, Jia, Lu Ziqing, and the other 3 towns of Jiangbei surrender to the Qing army, we can first use force to suppress them and remove this hidden danger. Military advisor is wise. Guozi stood up and bowed from afar. She was completely convinced. Jia Su moved to the side. As a strategist, when they set off from Jianya, Jia Su had already calculated all kinds of possibilities in his mind. The fall of Yangzhou City was naturally one of them. That was why Jia Su could come up with a countermeasure in a short period of time. This was the difference between a top strategist and an ordinary strategist. They always planned ahead and were prepared for the worst. They never made last-minute efforts. Since the plan had been decided, Guozi also acted swiftly and decisively. That night, the army broke camp and continued north. They had to quietly go around Yangzhou City and continue north before the Qing army reacted. Of course, Guozi did not forget to write a letter that night, reporting the frontline battle report in detail to Ouyang Shuo. Just as Guozi and his troops went north that night, the news of the fall of Yangzhou also began to spread. Seeing that the Qing army was powerful, the hearts of the people in the southern Ming Empire were wavering. The commanders of the 4 towns of Jiangbei started to have small plans. Qin Xini and the other civil officials also stopped going to the Prince Regent's residence to hand over the visiting cards. The mountain rain was coming, and the wind was blowing. Chapter 1076. P.S. Added an update. Apologies. Jianya. The news of Yangzhou's fall was like a huge dark cloud that shrouded the sky above Jianya City. Along with the news, there were all kinds of rumors, such as, since the Qing army has captured Yangzhou, they will soon attack Jianya, causing panic among the people. The atmosphere was extremely tense. In the court, some ministers had already vaguely suggested that they should consider surrendering for the sake of the safety of the people. Ouyang Shuo, the newly appointed regent, naturally became the target of public criticism. Even Emperor Hongguang, who was sitting on the dragon throne, felt uneasy. Looking at the ministers in the hall who each had their own thoughts, Hongguang Emperor, who had long lost control of the situation, looked around. In the end, he realized that he could only rely on Ouyang Shuo. No matter what, Ouyang Shuo still had 40,000 troops under his command. What do you think we should do? Glorious Light Emperor asked. Ouyang Shuo was actually calm. He stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, don't worry. Although the enemy has captured Yangzhou, they're only taking advantage of our precarious situation. They have not directly confronted our army. Who will emerge victorious is still unknown. Yes. You are absolutely right. The Glorious Light Emperor grasped at straws as if he was grasping at straws. Only then did he remember that the 200,000 mutant soldiers were still intact. He said, "If that's the case, I hope that you can quickly move the army back to Jianye and garrison it." The other ministers also agreed. Without a large number of soldiers guarding the place, they really couldn't be at ease. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo helplessly said, "Our army already has a countermeasure. Please rest assured, Your Majesty. As for Jianye's safety, there are 40,000 mutant soldiers and Lu Yangzuo's troops guarding it." As he spoke, Ouyang Shuo lightly glanced at Lu Yangzuo. Lu Yangzuo seemed to have sensed Ouyang Shuo's gaze, and his face slightly twitched. Right. Although Glorious Light Emperor nodded repeatedly, he didn't dare to refute Ouyang Shuo. After thinking for a while, he cautiously said, "For the sake of safety, I hope that my beloved subject can return the troops as soon as possible." For the emperor to go this far, it was tasteless. When Ouyang Shuo saw this, he couldn't bear to lose face for Bright Light Emperor in the end, so he nodded in agreement. Of course, the vanguard army would have to make their own arrangements as to how they would set it up. He did not believe that just by relying on Guizi and Jiasu's combination, they could not break through Yangzhou City. After the court was dismissed, Ouyang Shuo returned to his residence. In the end, the turmoil in the imperial court was only a small problem. What Ouyang Shuo was worried about was that the remnants of the Great Shun Army and Great Shizhong Xinzhong, whom he had just contacted, would be thwarted because of this. In order to win over the remaining troops of the Great Shun Army, Ouyang Shuo even asked Li Jing to personally receive them. "I hope they have some patience." That afternoon, Guizi's secret letter was urgently sent to Ouyang Shuo. After reading it, Ouyang Shuo couldn't help but praise Jiasu's scheme. Bringing Jiasu along this time is the right decision. With Jiasu's plan, Ouyang Shuo felt much more at ease. He immediately summoned the person in charge of the Mountain Sea Guards and ordered, "Yangzhou has fallen. Those clowns will definitely be jumping around. This is the best time to collect evidence. Don't let it go." Understood. In fact, the Mountain Sea soldiers had already gathered some evidence. However, there were still some cunning old foxes who had hidden themselves well, so the Mountain Sea soldiers had yet to dig them out. "This time, we're going to catch them all in one fell swoop." Ouyang Shuo's eyes shone with a cold light. As the Mountain Sea Guards attacked, the already turbulent Jianye city was bound to become even more turbulent. On the 5th day of the battle, when Guizi's troops suddenly bypassed Yangzhou City and appeared upstream of the Huai River, one could imagine the surprise and shock of the Qing army. When did they sneak past? Duo was very puzzled. In order to avoid detection by the Qing army, Guizi had put in a lot of effort. Similarly, it only took one morning. With the cooperation of the Imperial Navy, Guizi's troops only took one morning to recapture Sizhou, which had been conquered by the Qing army. They also intercepted the provisions that the Qing army was preparing to transport to Yangzhou City, successfully achieving the strategic goal that Jiasu had set. This time, it was the Qing army's turn to be upset. According to Duo's original plan, he was prepared to fight the enemy in Yangzhou City. After wiping out the southern Ming mutant army, he could directly march in and take Jianye. This was originally a very safe battle plan. Now that Guizi's troops had suddenly made such a move, it completely disrupted Duo's battle plan. Not to mention anything else, the issue of provisions had suddenly become a big problem for the Qing army. As mentioned earlier, the Huai River and the Yangtze River were the main transport routes for provisions in the southern region. The Qing army's provisions were mainly transported through the Huai River. Now that the Imperial Navy of the Xia dynasty was stuck in the upper reaches of the Huai River, the Qing army's neck was immediately choked. Not to mention that Di Chun did not bring a naval fleet for this battle. Even if he had, with the standard of the two great Zhou fleets, in front of the better-equipped Imperial Navy of the Xia dynasty, they would be defeated. As for the Qing army's hastily assembled navy, it was even more inadequate. Under the command of Zhou Yu, who was already familiar with inland naval battles, the Imperial Navy was an invincible existence. It was no wonder that the Qing army did not know that the Imperial Navy had passed by Yangzhou City. Yangzhou City the Castellan's residence. Duo summoned Di Chun, Lien Pe, and Abatai, who had just led his troops to meet up for a meeting. Yangzhou City is already short of provisions. It can only sustain the army for 5 days at most. What should we do next? Everyone, please speak. Duo did not immediately come to a conclusion. In front of the Qing army, there were only 2 options, south or north. I suggest north. The one who spoke was Di Chun. Jianye is not like Yangzhou. It is a majestic city and heavily guarded. It will not be easy to attack it. If our army suffers a setback in Jianye, we will be in danger of being attacked from both sides by the enemy. As long as we go north and get provisions, we will be able to gain a firm foothold and choose another day to fight. Di Chun had a thorough understanding of the strength of the Great Xia Imperial Army. He knew that with the Imperial Army guarding Jianye, it would not be easy to capture it. Therefore, he suggested north, which was a wise strategy. Unexpectedly, Di Chun's words angered someone. It was Abatai, who had just arrived. TSK, you dissimulated man, you are boosting the morale of others and diminishing your own prestige. Abatai was very rude to Di Chun. How can a small Jianye city resist the Qing Iron Cavalry? I suggest we go south immediately. As he spoke, Abatai asked Duo for permission to fight. When we go south, I am willing to be the vanguard. It was no wonder. Ever since the Qing army entered the pass, especially after Emperor Xuanji moved the capital to Yanjing and destroyed Great Shun, the Qing dynasty's tendency to unify the world had gradually become clear. It was inevitable that a Manchu Eight Banners general like Abatai would become arrogant and think that the Eight Banners army was invincible and could dominate the world. Moreover, Di Chun was a Han, so Abatai had no scruples. Hearing this, Di Chun's face instantly turned red. He clenched his fists, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Di Chun was a proud man. How could he bear the humiliation of a boorish man like Abatai? To be honest, the strength of the Eight Banners army was only comparable to that of the peasant army, so Di Chun did not take it seriously at all. Just when Di Chun was about to get angry, Duo suddenly spoke. Chapter 1077. Both of you have a point. Allow me some time to think before I make a decision. Due to the intense smell of gunpowder in the air, Duo very cleverly stopped fighting and temporarily ended the meeting. Di Chun got up and left with a gloomy face. There was a hint of regret in his heart. If he had known it would be like this, he would have chosen the southern Ming Empire's camp and killed all these arrogant guys. Those who are not of our race must have a different heart. Di Chun seemed to have understood something. After Di Chun left, Abatai said, 10th Wangye, do you really believe that dissimulated man's words? Isenjuro Duo was the 15th son of Nurachi, the younger brother of Azig and Dorgan. He was the leader of the Bordered White Banner and was known as the 10 Kings. He was one of the 8 great generals of the early Qing dynasty. Duo narrowed his eyes. You were not present at the Battle of Yangzhou, so you don't know how powerful the dissimulated army is. He has 100,000 elite soldiers under his command. How can we offend him? Abatai was startled. What does your highness mean? Duo straightened his back. The dissimulated army is strong, but the Eight Banners army is not weak either. From tomorrow onwards, you will be the vanguard to attack Jianye. I will be there soon. Abatai was overjoyed. What about the dissimulated army? Let them guard Yangzhou City. Our 150,000 soldiers are enough to attack Jianye. Duo was indeed an experienced general. Although he was confident in the Eight Banners army, he was not as overconfident as Abatai. Leaving Di Chun's troops to guard Yangzhou would give them nothing to worry about. Your Highness is wise. Abatai sighed in admiration. Di Chun was furious when he learned of Duo's arrangement. Bastard! Guarding Yangzhou was not an easy task. Firstly, Yangzhou was short of food. Secondly, the city walls were broken. Thirdly, there was no place to defend. Fourthly, it was not popular. With these 4 shortcomings, no matter how confident Di Chun was, he did not think that his 100,000 soldiers could stop Guizi's attack. Once Yangzhou City was breached, no matter what the outcome of the battle was, Di Chun would have to leave early. Duo's intention was sinister. He wanted the dissimulated army of the two camps to kill each other while he led the main force of the Qing army to the south to capture Jianya. In comparison, Abatai seemed a little immature. Di Chun saw through Duo's intentions, but he couldn't refute him. He could only follow his orders. This time, he only had 100,000 soldiers, and he was in the Qing camp, so he couldn't lead his own camp like Ouyang Shuo. Looking at the backs of the Qing army heading south, Di Chun's eyes flashed with a trace of viciousness. On the sixth day of the battle, just as the Qing army was heading south, Jianya City suddenly underwent a great purge. In the name of the regent, Ouyang Shuo listed out the crimes of Qin Qianyi and the others one by one. With the cooperation of the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court, they were imprisoned one by one. If the circumstances were serious, their wealth would be confiscated and used as military resources. In order to deter the officials, Ouyang Shu even transferred 40,000 imperial guards into the city to guard it. Qin Qianyi and the others were pondering how to place their bets on both sides. They had even secretly written the congratulatory note of surrendering to the Qing court. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, they would be thrown into prison? All their plans were in vain. What streaked across the sky were the powerless words, "I'm innocent, I'm innocent." That was the power of lightning. The sudden storm made Jianya City, which was already nervous and uneasy, even more terrified. In an instant, rumors spread everywhere. There were even wealthy families that began to move south to seek refuge in Lingnan, which was further south. At this moment, the news of the Qing army heading south spread. This was like adding oil to a raging fire, and the entire Jianya City was in an uproar. There were countless people fleeing. The strange thing was that the regent, Ouyang Shuo, did not stop them and allowed the people to flee. He only brought 3,000 divine martial guards and swaggered to visit Liu Yangzuo's troops stationed outside the city. When Liu Yangzuo saw this, his face instantly turned pale. After Ouyang Shuo left, Li Jing, who had already returned to Jianya, took over Liu Yangzuo's 50,000 troops. As for Liu Yangzuo himself, he brought his family and left Jianya quietly under the protection of a group of bodyguards. No one knew what happened in Liu Yangzuo's military camp in less than an hour that made the arrogant Liu Yangzuo obediently hand over the command of the troops and retreat in a sorry state. Those who had personally experienced it only whispered, "The saber light is very white. The blood is very red." In the afternoon, Li Jing brought 50,000 Nanming troops into the city. Just as Di Chun had expected, the 40,000 imperial guards of the Great Xia were supplemented by the 50,000 Nanming troops. With the god of war Li Jing holding the fort, it was simply wishful thinking for Duo to break through Jianya in a short period of time. Needless to say, after Li Jing's mediation, the remaining 60,000 Great Shun troops were already approaching Jianya. Zhang Xianzhong, who was far away in Sichuan, had already given a clear answer. As long as the Nanming troops led their troops north, the Great Western Army would immediately leave Sichuan and kill their way into the Qing territory to drive out the Tatars together. A large net had already quietly enveloped the Qing dynasty. Perhaps some people will be puzzled. Why did the Qing army, which had always been unstoppable in history, suddenly become difficult after Ouyang Shuo intervened? It was as if there were enemies of the Qing army everywhere. It was not difficult to understand. Firstly, the Qing army did not have the advantage in terms of military strength or individual combat power. Especially in the early stages of the war, they were even at an absolute disadvantage. In the beginning, Dorgan only wanted to take advantage of the internal strife of the Ming dynasty to enter the pass and take advantage of some resources and people. He planned to make a profit and leave. The best result was to occupy the Swallow Cloud 16 prefectures. If someone had told Dorgan at that time that the Qing could unify the world, Dorgan would have been so scared that his legs would have turned to jelly. He would not have believed it even if he was beaten to death. It was only when Li Zicheng forced Wu Sangue into a dead end that Dorgan took advantage of the situation and successfully took over the Shanhai Pass that his ambition to enter the Central Plains gradually grew. Even so, he probably did not have the courage to unify the world. When the Qing army worked hard to destroy Li Zicheng's Great Shun regime in the north, more than half of the Ming dynasty's territory and officials were still nominally under the Ming dynasty's rule. Their total military strength even surpassed that of the Qing army. Unfortunately, even at this time, the Ming dynasty was still busy with internal strife. For the sake of the throne, they fought to the death, giving the Qing army enough time to destroy Great Shun. When Great Shun was destroyed, the Qing army could be considered to have been truly established. Even so, the north and the south were only evenly matched. It was not said that either side had the absolute advantage. One of the key reasons why the Southern Ming dynasty, the Great Western Dynasty, and the subsequent regimes were destroyed by the Qing army in a short period of time was that the South lacked a valiant warrior who could turn the tide. Putting aside Gao Jie and the other warlords, Shi Kefa could only be considered a man of honor and integrity and not a great talent. That was until Ouyang Shua appeared. In terms of tactics, Ouyang Shua was far superior to others. In terms of strength, the 200,000 mutant soldiers were his greatest trump card. With the help of Li Jing, Guazi, and the other generals, the entire situation was naturally different. Chapter 1078. The arrogance of Duo, Abatai, and the other Manchurian high-ranking military officers, as well as their contempt and vigilance toward Di Chun, were the second reason for the Qing army's current predicament. If Duo had listened to Di Chun, he wouldn't have been in such a difficult situation. Of course, there were no ifs in the world. On the 8th day of the battle, when Duo led his troops to the outskirts of Jianya City, they were faced with a heavily guarded city of steel. Without the shackles of the surrender faction, Ouyang Shua could fight with all his might. As Duo looked at the sparse garrisons on Jianya City walls, he did not care. He started setting up camp outside the city, waiting for the Divine Strategy Battalion's Red Barbarian cannons to arrive at the front line before attacking the city. Using the cannons to open the way, he led his troops into the city. Duo was already extremely familiar with such a tactic. There was no need to think about it at all. When Li Jing, who was on the city wall, saw this, he did not even look back. He passed the order to the entire army to act according to the original plan. Yes, sir. A day passed in the blink of an eye. The Duo tribe was stationed in the eastern suburbs of Jianya, while the Abatai tribe was stationed in the northern suburbs. The two armies formed a triangle. When the sun set in the west and the afterglow of the setting sun shone on the tender green grass of the outskirts, smoke was already rising from the camp. The Qing army started to light a fire to cook. In the central camp, Duo sat at the head of the tent, summoning his generals to make the final arrangements. Based on the current progress, the Divine Strategy Battalion's cannons would arrive at the front lines as soon as tomorrow. Duo already felt somewhat impatient. A general laughed and said, "I heard that civil strife broke out in Jianya City 2 days ago. They're really courting death. These Han people only know how to fight among themselves." The Manchurian Qing generals did not conceal their contempt for the Han people at all. The successive victories had already clouded their minds. It was Duo. Even though he didn't say it out loud, due to his status, his tacit agreement was enough to explain everything. "I still have to give it my all." Duo looked around and said, "If nothing unexpected happens, this will be the final battle to destroy the Southern Ming Empire. If we win this battle, this prince will naturally ask His Majesty for merits." "Thank you, Prince." All the generals looked fervent. Ever since they entered the Great Wall, the Qing court was famous for their generous rewards to the soldiers with military merits. In addition to the title of nobility, he would also be rewarded with a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, and land. After robbing more than half of the Ming dynasty, the Qing court was overflowing with wealth. Not to mention gold, silver, and jewelry, the title of nobility was the richest in the entire Qing dynasty. There were 12 people who could inherit the title of nobility and did not need to be demoted. 8 of them were members of the imperial family who had made great achievements in the early years of the Qing dynasty. Needless to say, conquering the southern Ming Empire was a gargantuan achievement. It was no wonder that these generals were so enthusiastic. At this moment, soldiers brought out plates of delicacies, grills of roasted lamb, and even jars of aged wine. This made the generals, who hadn't smelled alcohol for a long time, swallow their saliva. There were some who were addicted to alcohol. Just a whiff of the aroma of the wine wafting out of the jars was enough to make them look intoxicated. How fragrant! Just as everyone was wondering what song their leader was going to sing, Duo had already raised his wine cup and said with a smile, "Tomorrow is the final battle. Tonight, we will make an exception and add to the fun with good wine. I hope everyone will enjoy themselves to the fullest and kill the enemy bravely. Cheers!" Duo's ability to win over the hearts of the people was also very impressive. With just a few words, he stirred up the hot blood of the generals. They wanted nothing more than to immediately go into battle and kill the enemy. They shouted, "Cheers!" Because there was good wine to add to the fun, the atmosphere of the banquet was very lively. Just as the banquet reached its climax, faint sounds of fighting suddenly came from outside the camp. "What's going on?" Duo was very vigilant. His eyes and ears were very sharp. Even in the midst of the lively banquet, he could still catch the strange sounds in the distance. Hearing this, the originally lively tent instantly quieted down. General, this is bad." Coincidentally, just as Duo was shouting his question, a soldier rushed in. "What happened? Why are you so panicked?" Duo was indeed a general. He was shocked, but not panicked. His expression was extremely calm. He knew very well that at times like this, as the leader, he had to be even more calm. Otherwise, the morale of the army would be shaken. With a whoosh, the generals all looked at the soldier, causing the latter's face to turn pale. He hurriedly said, "General, the enemy has suddenly charged out of the city. They have already charged into the camp." Clang! Someone's wine cup fell to the ground and shattered. Li Jing was Li Jing. He did not play his cards according to common sense. After discovering that there were only 150,000 Qing troops heading south, and that the enemy's mutant army was still guarding Yangzhou, Li Jing weighed the difference in strength between the two sides and immediately gave up on the traditional method of defending the city. He decided to take the initiative to attack. With the 40,000 imperial soldiers of the Great Xia dynasty, the 3,000 divine martial guards, and the 50,000 Nanming army that had just been incorporated, coupled with the surprise attack, Li Jing was confident that he would be able to win the battle. There was no need for him to defend at all. In order to confuse the enemy, Li Jing deliberately only placed some scattered soldiers on the city wall. As expected, Duo fell for it. He did not have any wariness at all. He even invited the generals to a banquet at night to warm up for the battle the next day. Unexpectedly, Li Jing did not wait until tomorrow. If it was at night, with Duo's cautiousness, he would definitely arrange for patrols and increase his guard. However, Li Jing chose to do it at dusk, which was the time when the Qing army was the most relaxed after a day of fighting. Kill! Su Chu led the 3,000 divine martial guards as the vanguard and quickly broke through the enemy camp. The 30,000 imperial soldiers of the Great Xia dynasty followed closely behind and charged into the Qing army camp, causing a monstrous massacre. Further back were the 40,000 Nanming soldiers. They advanced with fear and trepidation, not daring to believe what they were seeing. In the impression of the Nanming army, they had never taken the initiative to attack the Qing army. Even so, the soldiers of the Nanming army did not dare to be crafty. Firstly, Ouyang Shua's display of might in the military camp that day was still vivid in their minds. It made them feel fearful and did not dare to act rashly. More importantly, there were 10,000 imperial soldiers of the Great Xia dynasty behind the Nanming army. Li Jing's arrangement of troops could be said to be smooth and natural. He understood it well. Kill! In front of them, the Great Xia imperial army advanced rapidly in the Qing army camp with an invincible momentum. Wherever they passed, the Qing army could not retaliate and was directly flattened. The Qing army, which was insufferably arrogant in the eyes of the Naming army, was actually so weak. No, it's not that the Qing army is too weak, but that the mutant army is too strong. The aura of the great Xia imperial army and the hot-blooded scene gradually aroused the hidden passion and pride in the soldiers of the Naming army. They were infected by this, as if they had been blessed with a halo of courage. They instantly rose. There was a ferocious tiger hidden in everyone's heart. The Naming army was not born weak, nor were they born cowards. As the saying went, the soldiers are strong, but the generals are strong. With a general like Lu Yangzhua, they naturally could not rise. Even if there was no lack of good generals in the Naming army, they could not control the overall situation. It was different now. They had only changed a general. Under the influence of the great Xia imperial army, the entire army seemed to have been reborn and emitted endless energy. Li Jing, who was on the city wall, finally smiled when he saw that. Chapter 1079. Li Jing's tactic had succeeded. Just as Duo and the others were feeling bewildered, the great Xia Imperial Guards had already reached the middle of the camp. The Nanming army followed suit. The Qing army's defeat was beginning to show. In the tent of the Central Army, Duo was still calm. He put down his wine cup and ordered, "Gather the troops immediately. Let's fight." Yes. The group of generals quickly dispersed. The Eight Banners army was far from being corrupted by wealth and peace-like in the future. Although they were arrogant, they were still considered elite troops and could still fight. This was Duo's confidence. At the same time, Duo sent someone to inform the Abatai tribe in the north that there was no need to rush to the east to reinforce the east. They could directly charge into the city. I don't believe that they will not retreat after Jianya falls. Duo was going to attack Wei to save Zhao. Now, it depended on which side could last longer. If the Duo tribe was defeated first, there would be no need to mention anything. If the Abatai tribe charged into Jinya first, it would be a good opportunity for the Qing army to counterattack. Abatai had already gathered the troops and was preparing to rush to the east. When he suddenly received Duo's military order, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he revealed a murderous look and grinned. "Follow me." As he spoke, the entire army turned around and charged toward the north city wall of Jianya. Apart from the original 10,000 garrison troops of Jianya, the 3,000 Imperial Guards of the palace, and the 10,000 Naming soldiers that Li Jing had specially left behind regarding the north city wall, they were facing 50,000 ferocious and wolf-like troops. If not for the previous purge, Li Jing would not have dared to leave the north to such a miscellaneous army. Even so, after the battle in the east stabilized, Li Jing still rushed to the north and personally commanded the battle there. Obviously, Duo's every step was within Li Jing's calculations. How could he not be defeated with such a gap? Kill. The Abatai tribe did not have the support of the Red Barbarian cannons. They could only use the most primitive method of attacking the city. They used ladders and siege, all in an attempt to break through the city gate and charge into the city. Calm down. Don't be afraid. Under Li Jing's command, the Nanming army calmed down and defeated their fear of the Qing army. With the help of the city wall and defensive resources, they launched an orderly counterattack. No matter what, Jianya was the capital of the Ming dynasty, so it had all the necessary facilities. Because it wasn't close combat, this gave the soldiers of the Nanming army courage. Arrows, logs, kerosene, stones, anything that could kill the enemy was put to use. This was fatal to the Eight Banners army. They were used to charging and killing on open plains, and they were used to relying on the Red Barbarian cannons to blast open the gates of the enemy's city and then starting a massacre inside the city. The Qing army was not used to this kind of siege warfare. Abatai was anxious, but there was nothing he could do. He could only send troops to the front line one after another. He knew very well that if they couldn't knock open the city gates as soon as possible, tonight would be the day of their deaths. In the blink of an eye, the last trace of the setting sun quickly disappeared into the distant horizon, leaving only a mass of dark clouds shrouding the skyline, making people feel very depressed. The moon hid behind the dark clouds and had no intention of showing itself. There seemed to be a gap in the transition between day and night at this moment. The world is going to change. On the city gate tower, Ouyang Shua silently looked at the distant horizon, his scarlet cloak fluttering in the wind. Feng Xiaohuang was also dressed in military attire, and the golden cloak made her look even more luxurious, making it hard for people to look at her directly. She didn't say anything, just silently accompanied Ouyang Shua, silently watching the massacre outside the city. When the two of them stood together, they naturally had a kind of noble bearing. The soldiers fighting outside the city occasionally turned their heads and glanced at the figures on top of the city gate. Unconsciously, they were full of energy and turned around to kill their way into the battlefield. The great Xia Imperial Guards knew that their king was always watching them. That's enough. After crossing the city wall, behind Ouyang Shua was a similarly restless city. After a round of moving houses, those who remained in the city were either people like Hongguang Emperor who had no choice but to stay, common people who couldn't move out of their homeland, or heroes who still had a trace of hot blood in their hearts. Listening to the massacre outside the city, they were anxious and fearful. The unknown was often the source of fear. Because they didn't know whether their own army had the upper hand or was at a disadvantage, they could only anxiously wait for the final judgment of their fate. Life or death could be decided by a thin line. There were also heroes and people who were righteous and unwilling to wait powerlessly like this. They quietly gathered at the north gate, either delivering food, treating the injured, or transporting supplies. This was a group of cute people. They might not have the ability and courage to go into battle, but they also understood a simple principle. When the survival of the country was at stake, every Huaxia child couldn't be spared and couldn't escape. This was their destiny. A broken backbone could be erected again. As long as the heroic spirit in their heart wasn't extinguished, righteousness would last forever. At this moment, something called cultural confidence and national courage was slowly reviving in Jianya City, like a spark that would eventually become a prairie fire. Inspired by this, more and more common people gathered at the North Gate. When the country was in danger, such a touching scene could always be seen. Night fell. It was like a black curtain that approached from afar. It was like a cloth that covered the sky and enveloped Jianya. The Qing army continued to fight, and no one lit a torch. The soldiers on both sides could only rely on the weak moonlight to continue fighting in the messy barracks. This was also disadvantageous to the great Xia army. Light the fire. However, Li Jing was already prepared. With a whoosh, torches lit up on the city wall one after another, making crackling sounds. They gradually drove away the darkness of the night and brought precious light. At the same time, large bonfires that were as tall as 2 people were lit outside the city. The huge flames soared into the sky and could be seen from afar, swaying with the wind. With the help of the flames, the great Xia Imperial Army fought even more fiercely, especially the 3,000 divine martial guards at the front. Under the leadership of the valiant General Su Chu, they were already bloodshot. Countless Qing generals were killed by Su Chu. They were like a divine sword that was incomparably sharp. Regardless of whether the Qing army was in the camp or gathering at the drill ground, the divine martial guards were always the first to arrive. They dispersed the troops that the Qing army had gathered with great difficulty and destroyed the confidence of the Qing army again and again. Why hasn't Abatai broken through the city gate yet? At the outermost perimeter of the barracks, Duo, under the protection of his bodyguards, was fighting the enemy with difficulty while anxiously waiting for the good news from the north. However, the Abatai tribe was like a stone sinking into the sea, and there was no reply. As time passed, Duo's heart gradually sank to the bottom. He realized that the Qing army was probably finished. At this point, even if the Abatai tribe successfully knocked down the city gate, It would be useless because the Duo tribe had suffered heavy losses. It would be difficult to reverse the situation. A glimmer of light flashed in Duo's eyes. He was ready to retreat. Chapter 1080. In the end, Duo did not manage to escape. Just as he was about to retreat with his troops, Su Chu suddenly arrived with the divine martial guards. Su Chu did not know that he had encountered the commander of the Qing army. When he saw that Duo was about to escape, he subconsciously shouted, "Scoundrel, where do you think you're going?" Then he slapped his horse and charged forward. This shout shook the surroundings. Duo was so scared that his legs trembled. He had been hesitant at first, but now he ran even faster. Only then did Su Chu realize that he might have met a big fish, so he immediately led his troops to chase after it. The two sides quickly left the camp and entered the endless wilderness. At this time, the moon was still hidden behind the dark clouds, only showing a corner. Fortunately, the divine martial guards were all skilled in martial arts, and their mounts were elite-grade blue buckskin warhorses. Using the weak moonlight, they chased after Duo and his troops. Occasionally, they used the divine crossbows to shoot out sharp arrows. Duo and his troops were in a sorry state. People were constantly being shot down from their horses. They did not dare to stop to counterattack and only wanted to run forward with all their might. They did not expect that the more anxious they were, the more likely they would encounter mishaps. Because of his anxiety, Duo did not pay attention to the rugged terrain in front of him. His horse lost its balance and tripped over a rock. With a rumble, he and his horse fell. Su Chu saw this and was overjoyed. He slapped his horse to catch up. Seeing their commander fall off his horse, the accompanying personal guards could do nothing but stop and prepare to fight to the death with the enemy. Although they were personal guards, they were no match for the divine martial guards. Kill! The divine martial guards fiercely charged into the crowd and cut down the Qing soldiers one by one as if they were cutting vegetables. They did not encounter any decent resistance, and the battlefield quickly calmed down. Duo was captured. Su Chu did not want to cause trouble and executed all the accompanying personal guards, leaving no one alive. Go back. Having caught a big fish, Su Chu was excited. He slapped his horse and rushed back. By the time they returned to the battlefield, the entire battle was nearing its end. Duo's escape became the fuse of the Qing army's defeat. Seeing that their commander was not around, the already low-morale Qing army no longer had the will to resist. They either surrendered or fled into the wilderness. When the news of Duo's defeat reached the northern battlefield, Abatai's face was as gloomy as water. The attack from the north did not go well either. Many people died, but the city gate was still as strong as ever. Abatai never knew that the crazy Naming army could be so difficult to deal with. Seeing that the Towa tribe was defeated, Abatai did not insist and ordered the army to withdraw. Under the cover of the night, Abatai led the rest of his troops and fled into the wilderness. He was going to Yangzhou City first. He wanted to regroup with the inhuman army. Then he would decide what to do. Perhaps Abatai hadn't realized that tonight, the fate of the entire Qing dynasty had been reversed. Kula, seeing the Qing army retreating in a sorry state, the Nanming army cheered louder and louder. It wasn't easy. Ever since the Qing army entered the pass, the Nanming army had never fought such a hardy battle. Through this battle, they seemed as if they'd been bathed in blood and had been reborn. All of them had become strong and fearless. Nothing could be more important than this. We won. The soldiers greeted each other and hugged each other tightly. Their eyes were firm and passionate. Yes, we won. The people in the city cheered, and it was even livelier than the New Year. People rushed to the streets to celebrate this hard-won victory. Their faces were full of happiness. The taverns and tea houses that had been closed for business reopened. The whole street suddenly became brightly lit, as if it was daytime. Drinks are on the house tonight. The tavern owner was heroic, using this way to celebrate this miraculous victory. Good. The atmosphere became more and more lively. Cheers. An old man in his 60s picked up a glass of wine and used his hand to quietly wipe away the tears at the corner of his eyes. His two sons died on the battlefield one after another, unfortunately becoming souls under the sabers of the Qing army. The great victory in front of them was the best sacrifice for the dead. On the eve of the war, his daughter and son-in-law let the old man escape with them. The old man didn't leave. He wanted to stay in Jianya and live or die with this ancient city. If the Qing army attacked Jianya, the old man didn't want to live alone. We won. The lovely people didn't forget the soldiers who had bathed in blood and killed the enemy. They prepared hot meals for them to reward these brave heroes. Amazing. People gave them thumbs up. The old man handed over an egg, and the young girl handed over a handkerchief to show their respect. The soldiers of the Southern Ming Army who returned from the battlefield were welcomed by the common people. This was a treatment they had never received before. At this moment, every soldier straightened their backs and puffed out their chests. Just based on tonight's performance on the battlefield, they deserved this honor. The long-lost warmth flowed in everyone's heart. Although it was night, they felt the sunlight shining on them, dispelling the haze that had been shrouding their hearts. Jianya, the ancient capital, came to life again. In the imperial palace. Your Majesty, we won. Chapter 1081. P.S. Once again, I thank the sun god Bai for his generosity. Early morning, Jianya. When the night dispersed and dawn arrived, people looked at the hell-like battlefield outside the city. Only then did they truly feel how tragic the battle last night was. The Qing army that had surrendered at the request of the Hongguang Emperor had been publicly executed. In the eastern suburbs outside the city, the original Qing army camp of the Duo tribe had been razed to the ground overnight. Corpses were everywhere, horses neighed, and black smoke curled up, adding a sense of desolation and tragedy. Vultures circled in the sky, and wild dogs ran rampant on the ground. The corpses exposed to the predators were not only those of the Qing army, but also those of the imperial guards of the Great Xia dynasty and the Nanming army. After all, they were fighting at night in an unfamiliar camp. Casualties were inevitable. The Qing army was not a pushover. Without the divine martial guards to clear the way and the imperial guards of the Great Xia dynasty, the outcome of the battle last night would have been hard to predict. Duo responded in time, but he was not strong enough. In the end, he was defeated and lost his life, especially in the north. In the face of the fierce attack of the Abatai tribe, the troops guarding the city wall also suffered heavy casualties. Several times, the Qing army had already rushed to the top of the city wall and almost tore apart the line of defense of the Nanming army. Fortunately, Li Jing was in charge and the danger was averted. If the Duo tribe had not been defeated so early, once the Abatai tribe attacked the city, it would have been really dangerous. Looking at the hell-like battlefield outside the city, the surviving soldiers of the Nanming army secretly rejoiced and felt proud. The enemy's bones were their best medals of merit. In the morning, the Hongguang Emperor personally presided over the cremation ceremony of the fallen soldiers to further boost morale. After the ceremony, the Hongguang Emperor rewarded the meritorious soldiers. The scene was extremely lively. Ouyang Shuo only smiled and did not interfere with the Hongguang Emperor's attempt to win the hearts of the people. In the end, Ouyang Shuo and the others were just passers-by on the battle map, not the real protagonists. Naturally, Ouyang Shuo did not need to compete with the Hongguang Emperor. If it was in the real historical background, a regent like Ouyang Shuo would probably not have a good ending. Even if he could die of old age, there would be endless trouble after his death. Dorgan was a typical example. For the Qing dynasty to enter the Central Plains and unify the world, this assistant minister, who had made illustrious military exploits, enjoyed great glory during his lifetime. He was successively conferred the titles of Uncle Regent, Imperial Uncle Regent, and Imperial Father Regent. However, 2 months after Dorgan's death, Emperor Shunji stripped Dorgan of his title and dug up his tomb. As for now, Ouyang Shuo could naturally laugh it off. That afternoon, the remaining 60,000 Great Shun soldiers arrived outside Jianya City. On their way here, they had already learned that the main force of the Qing army had been annihilated outside the city of Jianya. Thereupon they quickened their marching speed, wanting to get to the bottom of it. Originally, they had some doubts about this news because they had fought with the Qing army and knew how powerful they were. It was only when he saw the unclean battlefield that he was convinced. Amazing! The Great Shun soldiers sighed in admiration, and their expressions were extremely carefree. Because of the destruction of Great Shun and the death of the roaming king Li Zicheng, they had become mortal enemies with the Qing army. After hearing the details of last night's battle from the Nanming army, the originally arrogant generals of the Great Shun army became extremely obedient, and they only had respect for Ouyang Shuo and his group. Their gazes toward the Great Xia Imperial Army were also filled with fear. "Please instruct us, Prince Regent. We won't say anything else." The generals patted their chests and promised. Ouyang Shuo smiled and did not take everything seriously. The Great Shun army, which had once dominated the Ming dynasty's territory, was annihilated in less than half a year when faced with the encirclement of the Qing army. Although the accidental death of the roaming king Li Zicheng was one of the reasons, the main problem was the Great Shun army itself. After the fall of Yanjing, the narrow-minded and backward side of this peasant army began to be exposed. Corruption, greed, and other bad habits began to spread in the army, continuously corroding it. Old habits were hard to change. Even if they said it beautifully, how could Ouyang Shuo easily believe them? Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo was not fighting alone. Behind him stood a luxurious team of commanders. Ouyang Shuo smiled and introduced Li Jing to the generals of the Great Shun army. The two sides had already contacted each other before. This time, it could be considered as an official establishment of a subordinate relationship. The name of the great Tang god of war still carried a lot of weight in the eyes of this group of generals. Otherwise, the Great Shun army would not have agreed to meet up the moment Li Jing set out. After the meeting, they naturally headed north. In order to stabilize the court, Ouyang Shuo, the Prince Regent, had to personally oversee Jianya for the time being. Early the next morning, Li Jing would lead 35,000 Great Xia Imperial Guards, 30,000 Southern Ming Army, and 60,000 Great Shun Army to the north, a total of 125,000 troops. Their main goal was to take back Yangzhou City. Just as the Qing army attacked Jianya, Guizi's troops also won consecutive battles in the Huai River region. Not only did they successfully take back Huayan and Tongzhou, but they also suppressed Gao Jie's troops in one fell swoop. The remaining troops, Huang Digong and Lu Ziqing, would probably not resist fearlessly after knowing that the Duo division had been destroyed. Ouyang Shuo believed that Guizi would be able to control the armies of the three towns in Jiangbei well. The armies of the four towns in Jiangbei had an average of about 50,000 soldiers. After a few small battles, the three towns in Jiangbei had more or less suffered some losses, but the main force still existed. This way, even without the cooperation of Zhang Xianzhong's Great Western Army, the total number of troops in the Ming dynasty would reach about 400,000. With such a vast army, it would be enough to charge into Yanjing and recover the lost land. On the 10th day of the battle, Abatai led the remnants of the troops and traveled day and night before finally escaping back to Yangzhou City in a sorry state. Less than 50,000 of the 150,000 troops who had set out on the expedition returned. The rest were all buried in the battlefield of Jianya. Even the commander of the southern expedition, Duo, was captured and killed. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the Qing army, who had won consecutive battles. The entire team was dejected and dejected. They no longer had the high spirits they had when they set off. Di Chun, who was guarding Yangzhou, had received the news a day ago. Although he had expected it, he was still very shocked when he learned that the Qing army had been defeated to such an extent. Think about it from another perspective. If there were 100,000 Great Zhou soldiers guarding Jinya, they would not have been able to achieve such a brilliant result. Army godly Jing. A trace of desire flashed in Di Chen's eyes, but there was also unconcealable jealousy. He was jealous of why all the famous generals had joined the great Xia and could not be used by him. Among the 10 famous generals of Huaxia, only the great Xia had Sun Wu, Bai Qi, Han Exin, Hu Xubing, Li Jing, and Li Mu. There was also Wang Jian of the great Qin, Wei Qing of the great Han, and Su De, who had yet to be born. The only real general in the great Zhou dynasty was Wu Qi. Even so, Wu Qi could not really be used by Di Chen because he was loyal to Xiongba. The only person Di Chen could really trust and rely on was Lien Pe. How could this not make Di Chen jealous? But even though he was jealous, Di Chen did not lose his mind. Now the question in front of him was, how should he choose? Of course, Di Chen could lead his troops away and get rid of the quagmire of war. But Di Chen was not willing to make this trip in vain. Not only did he let Ouyang Shua take advantage of him, but he also did not get anything. It was also not in line with his original intention of building a friendship with the Qing dynasty. But if he stayed and continued to fight, what were his chances of winning? Yangzhou City would definitely not be able to be defended. The only way was to immediately retreat to the north and wait for Dorgan to mobilize the army. Then both sides could set up a battle formation and fight to the death. Chapter 1082. In the end, Di Chen decided to give it a try. But as soon as Abatai entered the city, he pointed at Di Chen's nose and scolded, "Bastard slave, why didn't you come to help us when you saw our army suffering a setback?" Of course, Abatai's words were extremely unreasonable. It was Duo who personally ordered Di Chen to guard Yangzhou. The Battle of Jianya happened at night, and Yangzhou was hundreds of miles away from Jianya. Even if Di Chen wanted to help, it would be too late. Abatai was venting his frustration on Di Chen. Di Chen also had a temper. Di Chen was polite to Duo, but he didn't have a good expression in front of Abatai. He said in a deep voice, "Watch your mouth. How dare you talk back to me?" Abatai was also furious. If Di Chen swallowed his anger, Abatai might just let it go after venting his anger. But Di Chen's attitude completely angered Abatai. Ever since the Qing army entered the pass, no Han dared to speak to them like this. Abatai said subconsciously, "Someone drag this dog slave away and give him 30 lashes." "Yes, sir." Abatai's bodyguards were about to step forward to arrest Di Chen. "Who dares?" Lien Pe, who was standing behind Di Chen, let out an angry roar. Shua. Immediately, groups of great Zhou imperial army rushed in. In the blink of an eye, Abatai and his bodyguards were surrounded. Both sides immediately pulled out their swords. Abatai's expression changed when he saw this. Only now did he remember that there were 100,000 mutants stationed in Yangzhou City. On the other hand, there were only 50,000 soldiers left in the Qing army. If they really fought, the Qing army would be completely defeated. But if he just let it go like this, Abatai would lose face. He was in a dilemma, and his face turned red. Compared to Duo, Abatai was too immature and impulsive. From beginning to end, Di Chen was very calm and expressionless. Seeing Abatai's embarrassed expression, Di Chen said, "Remember, I'm here to cooperate with your army, not to be your slave. As long as I want, none of you can leave Yangzhou City today." "What do you want?" Abatai was still stubborn. Di Chen laughed and shook his head. "It's not what I want, but what the enemy wants. The Ming army is about to attack, and we are still fighting among ourselves. What is the point? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" Seeing this, Abate hurriedly walked down the stairs and asked, "What do you mean?" "Retreat." Di Chen said concisely, "We can't defend Yangzhou City. We have to report it to the regent." "All right." Abatai nodded. The resentment in his heart did not really dissipate. After reaching an agreement, the Emperor Dust tribe and the Abatai tribe didn't stay any longer and left Yangzhou dejectedly. Di Chen couldn't be blamed for being anxious. Once Guizi's troops blocked their way to the north, they wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. As the Qing army retreated from Yangzhou City, the second phase of the campaign began. Li Jing was steady. After leading his troops to Yangzhou City, he was not in a hurry to head north. Instead, he worked with Guizi's troops to completely wipe out the Jianghuai River Valley, recover the lost land, and protect the safety of Jianya. Only by taking down Jianghuai would the Ming army have the capital and foundation to fight the Qing army. On the 13th day of the campaign, Emperor Zhang Xinzhong finally confirmed that the Southern Ming army had not only recovered Yangzhou City, but also wiped out the Jianghuai River Valley and the main force of the Qing army. The two sides agreed. In 3 days, we will officially march north. In Yanjing, the defeat of the Duo tribe was a wake-up call to Dorgan. Different from history, after the Great Shun army was wiped out, the Qing army still had 400,000 troops stationed in the north, in addition to the 100,000 troops of the Duo tribe and the 50,000 troops of the Abatai tribe. The composition of the Qing army was relatively complicated. The most elite troops were the 8 Banners Army, which could be divided into the 8 Banners of Manchu, the 8 Banners of Mongolia, and the 8 Banners of Han. The 8 Banners of Manchu were mainly Manchu cavalry, which had about 50,000 people. The 8 Banners of Mongolia were Mongolian cavalry, which also had about 50,000 people. As for the 8 Banners of Han, it included Wu Sangui's troops and the former Ming army that surrendered to the Qing dynasty. The last part was the puppet army and prisoners of war that the Qing army had captured in the north, including the Great Shun army. Other than the 8 Banners of Manchu and the 8 Banners of Mongolia, the rest of the 300,000 troops all had their own hidden dangers. Therefore, Dorgan did not arrange for this army to move south, but stayed in the north to reorganize. But now he could not care so much. Dorgan could see things clearly. He knew that the Qing army, with less than 150,000 elites, controlled the entire situation. It was like walking on thin ice. If the war went well, everything would be fine, and the foundation of the Qing dynasty would become more and more stable. But if the war did not go well, and the enemy found out about the weakness of the Qing army, it would cause a chain reaction that would destroy the entire Qing dynasty. The destruction of the Duo tribe was likely to be such a fuse. The Duo tribe was the absolute main force of the Qing army. Out of the 100,000 troops, 50,000 were 8 Banners of Manchu cavalry. It was such an elite division that was badly battered outside Jianya City and was defeated by the Southern Ming mutants, completely exposing the weakness of the Qing army. Compared to the 100,000 troops that died in battle, this was the most fatal. This is difficult. For a moment, Dorgan was at a loss. At first, Dorgan was worried that the Di-Chun tribe would abandon the Qing dynasty first, which would be fatal. The strength of the mutants had been fully proved in the Battle of Jianya. At this time, the 100,000 troops under Di-Chun tribe's command became more and more precious. Fortunately, the next news made Dorgan quietly sigh in relief. The Di-Chun tribe did not give up on the Qing dynasty. After being humiliated by Abatai, they still made a rational judgment and decisively gave up Yangzhou City and led their troops north. After receiving the news, Dorgan specially asked for an imperial edict to praise the Di-Chun tribe and give them rewards. Abatai was severely reprimanded. Dorgan was very angry. Abatai, this idiot, almost made a mistake. Why was it Duo who died that night, not this idiot? Dorgan was ready to seize Abatai's leadership, which could be regarded as a comfort to Di-Chun. This was the advantage of dealing with smart people. Di-Chun's good intentions finally paid off. Taking advantage of Dorgan's good intentions, Di-Chun made a small request. He asked for a personal token and a letter from Emperor Xuanji. With these two things, when the battle was over, no matter which Qing dynasty emperor entered the capital, he would owe Di-Chun a big favor. In this way, some things would be easier to operate. At this point, no matter what the final result of the battle was, Di-Chun had already achieved his goal. This also meant that before the battle began, he was already in an invincible position. This kind of forbearance and calculation was indeed admirable. Chapter 1083. Even with the help of Di-Chun's troops, Dorgan still had to consider a problem. Facing the counterattack of the Ming dynasty, Should the Qing army take the initiative to fight back or choose a suitable location for a decisive battle? This was also very difficult. If they took the initiative to fight back, the Qing army would have to split up because the Ming army was using multiple attack tactics. This would increase the risk of war. No matter which route they took, the Qing army would not be able to bear it. If they chose a decisive battle, it would be like putting all their eggs in one basket. It was still a good choice. The problem was, would the Ming army obediently come after the Qing army chose the location for the decisive battle? Of course not. The northern territory was vast. The Ming army could go around the target city and continue north to Yanjing. If that was really the case, the Qing army would be put in an awkward position. This won't work, that won't work either. Dorgan was really in a dilemma. What gave him a headache was that as the news of the Qing army's defeat in Jianya spread, the northern territory was already unstable. Small conflicts started to break out everywhere. This was not difficult to understand. In history, in the process of the Qing dynasty unifying the world, other than fighting against the Great Shan army, the Southern Ming army, and the Great Shi army, there was another force that played an important role. That was the resistance of the people. The famous 3 slaughters of Jiading were a classic example. Even after the city was massacred, the people of Jiading were still fearless. Whenever there was a chance, they would raise the flag of resistance without hesitation. This was the embodiment of the strength of the Han family. Even after the Qing dynasty unified the world, the flames of resistance against the Qing and Ming among the people never died out. Seeing that the Qing army had suffered a setback in Jianya, the Southern Allied forces began to launch a large-scale counterattack. How could the Han people in the Northern Territory not be excited and reignite the flames of resistance against the Qing dynasty? Especially under the rule of the former Great Shan regime, the waves of resistance came one after another. The entire north was already faintly unstable. If the Qing army suffered a setback in a battle against the Ming army, it would immediately cause the entire north to explode and completely shake the foundation of the Qing dynasty's rule. Describing the Great Qing as swaying in a storm wasn't an exaggeration at all. And as the actual helmsman of the Qing dynasty, all the pressure was on Dorgan's shoulders. After thinking about it, Dorgan finally made a bold decision. That was to give up resistance and let the Ming army march straight in and fight the enemy to the death in Yanjing City. This is called being put on the brink of death to survive. After eliminating all other possibilities, this was the only feasible method. Right now, the Qing army did not have the ability to fight many battles and also did not have the ability to fight the Ming army while suppressing the local rebellion at the same time. Since it was like this, they might as well abandon everything and stake everything on one throw. If the Qing army was defeated in the Battle of Yanjing, everything would be over. Their skills were inferior, so there was nothing much to say. But once the Qing army wins the battle, they will be able to sweep the world with the momentum of a great victory. If the Qing army could sweep the Central Plains once, they could sweep it twice. The key was to defeat this menacing Southern Allied army and completely crush the hope of the Han clan. It had to be said that Dorgan was indeed outstanding for being able to dominate in that era. Not only did this person have a unique vision and was able to firmly grasp the key to turning the situation around in a hopeless situation, he was also more courageous than others. He firmly believed in his own judgment and dared to give up on the juicy meat that was already in his hands. He had a heroic spirit, as if the world was a chessboard. One could imagine what kind of waves this decision would set off in the imperial court, and how much pressure Dorgan would have to bear to make those Manchurian nobles who had just tasted the sweetness give up the fat meat that they had just eaten. Even so, Dorgan would still persist. This was because he had other considerations when choosing to fight in Yanjing. Although the Southern Allied army's morale was great, the intricacies within it were even more complicated than the Qing army. The mutant army, the 4 garrisons of Jiangbei, the remnants of the Great Shan army, and the Great Shi army were all tangled up together. When they had a common enemy and a common goal, under the command of the mutant army, they could indeed form a joint force to resist the Qing army. But what if they lost this goal? When the vast and boundless territory of the north was placed in front of them without any defenses, would Zhang Xinzhong and the others not have any selfish thoughts? They definitely would. Putting aside others, Zhang Xinzhong, one of the leaders of the rebel army, would definitely not be able to resist fighting for territory. If Zhang Xinzhong made a move, the remnants of the Great Shun army would definitely follow in Zhang Xinzhong's footsteps, refusing to accept orders and madly occupying territory in an attempt to reclaim Great Shun's territory. These two factions were the core forces that overthrew the Ming dynasty. So how could they be indifferent to the northern territories? Perhaps they would even start fighting each other before the decisive battle. In fact, even the 4 garrisons of Jiangbei might be involved. As the saying goes, when the Ming loses its deer, the whole world will chase it. From the moment Emperor Chongzhen hanged himself, the Ming dynasty was no longer the legitimate ruler of the world. The Southern Ming dynasty was only a new regime and couldn't represent the Ming dynasty. This had long since become the consensus of the world. When the Roman king Li Ziqing conquered Yanjing and established the Great Shun Kingdom, he had already considered himself the legitimate ruler of the world. Otherwise, after the Qing army entered the pass, the Great Shun army wouldn't have dilly-dallied and retreated so hesitantly, which was completely different from when they overthrew the Ming dynasty. At that time, the Great Shun army swept through the entire Ming dynasty's territory, coming and going like the wind without any hesitation. It was the same for Zhang Xinzhong. After the establishment of the Kingdom of Dashi, the leader of the Revolutionary Army's mentality underwent a drastic change. Before establishing the Great Shi Kingdom, he was just a roving bandit within the Ming dynasty and naturally had no scruples. After establishing the Great Shi Kingdom, he, Zhang Xinzhong, became the owner of this land. Since he was the owner, he naturally had the responsibility to defend his land. As such, when the Qing army attacked the Great Shi Kingdom, Zhang Xinzhong didn't hesitate to counterattack and didn't give up an inch of land. This was the difference in mentality and status. If the Qing dynasty took the initiative to give up the northern territory, then whether it was the Great Shi army or the remaining Great Shun army, what reason did they have not to take the opportunity to bring them under their rule? Even the Hongguang emperor, who was in charge of Jianya, wouldn't be indifferent. When that time comes, it will be very interesting. Whenever he thought of that scene, Dorgan couldn't help but smile. It had to be said that Dorgan's move of retreating in order to advance was indeed a stroke of genius. In this way, not only could the Qing army unite their armies, but they could also rely on the strong walls and cannons of Yanjing to take advantage of the right time and the right place. Even better, they could also use this to divide the Allied forces of the South, causing them to collapse without fighting. When the Allied forces of the South turned against each other, it would be the time for the Qing army to attack. The whole plan was closely linked, and it was extremely thorough. As expected of Dorgan. At this time, Dorgan looked to the south and muttered to himself, "Speaking of which, I'm really looking forward to it." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.